Mr. Albritton, turn your video off, please. Your camera. Mr. Cole, Mr. McQueen, turn your cameras off.
All right, I believe we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regularly scheduled Leon County School Board business meeting. It is Tuesday, April the 28th, and normally we would be coming to you live from the Aquilina Howell Center. Tonight, obviously, we are complying with the social distancing requirements, and we are individually located in our respective homes or offices. And so we will make our best effort at having a coordinated Zoom meeting for your viewing opportunity. Is there someone to lead the Pledge of Allegiance, which is going to be a little awkward from Zoom, but that's okay?
I will try to do so, Madam Chair, if that's all right.
Yes, please, sir.
All right, if you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
What?
Come on.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Well done. There's no thought for the day, which is typical of our normal agenda. Are there changes and additions to tonight's agenda?
Madam Chair, there are no changes nor additions to tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Madam Board Vice Chair, Ms. Bowen.
Yes.
That is typically her job. So that will take us into,
Madam Chair,
I'm sorry, Ms. Strickland.
if I might, before we get started, I'd like to pull some items from consent. Can I do that now?
Certainly.
I'd like to pull items 18.01 through 18.06. And I would like to recommend that we pull them off the agenda altogether tonight and further contemplate those items before we move on them. I think those are all the continuing contract items. And I think Mr. Jones brought up some pretty valid concerns and just enough concern to have questions about why we're trying to rush them through for a year without really understanding what it is that we're doing. And during this time, we want to make sure that everyone is included in any work opportunities, women-owned business, minority-owned businesses, small businesses, large businesses. And I have enough questions and would appreciate the time to gather all the information before we move on those items. So could we pull those off of the agenda tonight altogether and revisit them in 2 weeks?
Typically, that would not require a motion or a second. We would honor that just as a matter of our protocol. Do we need to ask staff if there's any unintended consequence of delaying that by 2 weeks? Mr. Superintendent?
Mr. Albritton, you want to respond? I don't believe there is, Madam Chair. I had Mr. Albritton and Rob McQueen on this meeting to respond to some of Mr. Jones's questions yesterday. I don't think there is, but Danny, why don't you chime in on that issue, whether or not there's an issue with pulling it for the next meeting?
No, there won't be any issues with it. It's just if we decide to re-advertise and put out, it will probably be July before we bring it back. But knowing that we're slack, well, I don't want to say slack, knowing the funding that we have currently with small projects and what we have going on at Rickards and Fairviews, I don't see that we're going to be using them very often. And they're in effect until June 30th as it is.
Okay, so Ms. Strickland would like to have those taken off. If there's no objection, I show that motion approved without objection. Thank you. So Ms. Strickland, say that again.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland.
Thank you. Thank everybody. Thank you, Daryl, for bringing those questions up yesterday. I think they were legit and we're not doing our due diligence. If any of us have questions in our mind that are not answered, if delaying by 2 weeks is gonna provide some peace of mind and get us the answers we need in time to contemplate that, then and there's no adverse effects, then I'm completely for that, and I appreciate the support of the board in that.
Ms. Strickland, it's items 18.
Yes. 18.01 through 18.06, I believe, is the
off the construction consent agenda.
correct.
Okay, very good. I think that takes us to the other general consent agenda at this time.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Williams.
actually before that 5.04 is the COVID update
Oh, that's
before we get to consent.
okay. So we will take that up now. I'd like to start by publicly thanking and taking a moment to value and appreciate the superintendent, his leadership team at the district office, all of our teachers, principals, support staff, everyone who's been involved in this very rapid shift to a new delivery model. I don't think it has been unnoticed by this grateful community. It's been it was a heavy lift, and I think we did it fairly well, remarkably well in many cases. And I know I speak on behalf of the board. I would not want us to embark on this conversation without first thanking you and your team, Mr. Superintendent, and all who've been involved, from the food distribution efforts and the community volunteers and the food service workers and the bus drivers and everyone who has helped to try to get our community through this very, very difficult time. I also want to say the same to our parents. I saw it on social media somewhere that, you know, we may all be in the same storm, but we are not all in the same boat. And that is true. We have families who, I know this goes without saying here, but I just want to acknowledge publicly that we know that for many of our families, this is a terrifying time, either because they have family members with health risks, or they're worried financially about the recovery of the economy, or if their business is going to be lost. We have children with special needs and learning disabilities and many, many, many countless services that our school district provides for families throughout the year, not the least of which is food and support for students with special needs and support for all of our families. And so to the parents who've figured out a way to try to adapt to virtual learning in a crisis, and to work from home and support your family from home and care for toddlers and elderly parents, and in my case, college students who are trying to graduate. Also, we acknowledge and appreciate you, and we thank you for that. And so I just want to make sure that we understand that we are all in this together, and we're doing the best we can to try to make it as accommodating. We can't please everybody all the time. I've heard from all extremes. Either there's too much information, there's too little information. These teachers are really trying to cram a whole 6-hour day and homework into one Zoom meeting, all the way to, you know, we need more because we have different people in different walks of life at different stages of their learning development. And so for all those reasons, I thank you and your team, Mr. Superintendent. I thank my colleagues on the board. It's been and always has been an honor to serve with you, and to our community and families, and to the volunteers who stepped up and either donated time or money. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you also, Madam Chair, for those kind words. And you're right, we have a wonderful team. I want to thank you all for all of your input and kind of keeping us, as Dr. Rogers would say, our finger on the pulse about our community and our constituents, whether they're in Mr. Jones's district on the Tharp Street corridor out in the Northeast. So we're having an idea of what the families are experiencing with all the different aspects of what's transpired since March the 13th, the day before spring break, when we announced we would not be returning. I applaud the governor in making the wise decision, not to reopen schools to students for the remainder of the school year. And every day we just get a little bit better. I can see it. The teachers are starting to flex their muscles with the distance learning platform. They're out of their comfort zone. We realize that, but a lot of them are really engaging and embracing it. During my comments at the end, I'll share a letter I received today that says just that from a parent. But we will have a somewhat of a lengthy report to be heard. We haven't seen each other in quite a while now, although I've been in conversation with each of you individually and independently. We have not come together as a collective group up until yesterday. But today we wanted to say, for the meat of the report, on where we are, where we started, and where we are and where we're going with several different facets of our school system, and then leave it up to you guys to ask questions as each individual presenter finishes. So with that, I'd like to first bring up our Director of Nutrition and Food Service, Mr. James Howcroft, to give an update on our feeding program and how well that's going, some of the challenges that he's faced, and kind of give an update from our food service point of view, which has been absolutely amazing. So, Mr. Howcroft, they're all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, and Superintendent. This is our meal service update. We began food service back on serving meals on March 23rd. At that time, we were serving Monday through Friday. We had 14 sites, and we were serving from 10:30 until 1:30. We set it up as a drive-through service, so you could drive through and pick up meals, and students didn't have to get out of the car, and it worked very well. After that, when the governor did his stay-at-home order, we were forced to put cafeteria managers only in schools to staff them. The cafeteria managers made the meal bags. They also served the meals to the students. And currently, we are operating at 22 sites. We've got 16 school sites: Appalachia Elementary, Astoria Park Elementary, Bond, Chairs, Fairview Middle, Fort Braden, Hartsfield Elementary, W.T. Moore Elementary, Oak Ridge, Pineview and Riley Elementary, Rudiger, Sable Palm, Sealy, Springwood, and Woodville. We also have 6 sites at apartment sites, which are Glen Oaks Apartments, the South City Head Start, which is Wesson, Windrush Village, the Oasis at the 1800, Generations Church, and Sienna Square Apartments. What we're serving at these sites now is we serve a meal. And what a meal is it's a breakfast and lunch that's put into one bag. In the beginning, we were serving Monday through Friday. Our food service workers had a lot of exposure to the public. And what we decided to do was step that back, and now we're serving Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We also reduced our serving times from 3 hours to 2 hours. We now serve from 10:30 until 12:30. On a Monday, when a student comes through, they receive a bag that has 2 meals in it. On Wednesday, they get the same thing, which is 2 meals in it. And then on Friday, we give them a bag with 3 meals, and that gives them meals throughout the weekend. We are currently serving Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10:30 to 12:30. The meals are just like the typical summer meals. They're cold sandwiches, there are wraps, Lunchables. They include fruit, juice, and milk. For breakfast, they have these great kits that Superintendent, you saw those kits at Glen Oaks, and they just have everything in it that kids need: cereal, milk, juice. And I think the program's going very well. I do want to say, as we begin our 6th week of service, I'm very proud to say that we've served over 144,000 meals to students in Leon County.
As Board Member Jones would say, you may applaud, right?
All right.
And I also would like to say a big thank you to the entire nutrition services team that has really pulled together here. And every day they're at work, they're doing their jobs, they're out there working with the family members, and they're working with the students, and they're missing their students, and we can't wait until we can all get back together again.
Madam Chair. I'll take that as a yes. I can't hear you, but Mr. Howcroft, we just want to thank you for everything your team has done. So many people have really recognized the crucial role that schools play in feeding our children. I think people who may not have realized before are now realizing what an important role we play well beyond education. And your team is absolutely incredible and has single-handedly helped improve the lives of children, you know, in a way that no other entity could meet. So I just can't imagine the transitions you guys have made in the last few weeks, and you're to be commended for your leadership and your entire group. Everyone who has touched any kind of box, handed out any kind of bag, we thank you for your service. Could you tell us a little bit about plans for the summer as we, you know, look toward June, July? Do we know that far down the road? Is there any of that information that can be shared with us now, or is that still sort of unfolding?
I think it's still unfolding, but I believe we're going to continue to serve at the sites we are at right now as long as we can possibly serve. And I think we'll do that. I mean, we're going to transition into the summer program is going to officially begin next Monday on the 4th. And that will also offer to community sponsors can also get involved with serving in the community. So that will give us even more sponsors to be serving students.
Okay. Are we looking at distribution? I know there was some talk of using buses to get to people who can't get to the facilities. Are we still looking at that? Is that still part of the discussion, or are we looking at some other model?
I think currently we're looking at what we have in place, but I think it's always open for discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Mr. Jones.
Okay, thank you. I didn't hear from the chair. I too want to join Ms. Strickland in acknowledging the hard work of Mr. Hallcroft and Dr. Gale and everyone who's a part of academic support services. I have seen them thoroughly engaged. I was very surprised to find Mr. Hallcroft fully engaged, although he is, although putting himself at great risk to be out there even after we had the quarantine order coming from the state of Florida. And yet he was still engaged in making certain that our children were served. I am curious to know, will this mean that when we move into the summer months, that the Department of Agriculture and its programs for food safety, will they also become active as well, or will that remain the responsibility of the district?
It will be a continuation of what we're doing right now. We've operated under summer guidelines since we started on the 23rd, but now it'll just officially go into the summer program where we've got certain training that we have to do. We have to operate by certain guidelines. We have reviews and audits that we have to do of our sites. So now that everything's kind of caught up a little bit, we'll go into that.
So most specifically, will break spots be engaged again as they traditionally are done during the summer months?
Absolutely. They've actually been engaged since we began service. If you go onto the summer break spot map, it will locate anyone that's serving food in Leon County, or actually in the state of Florida.
Okay, thank you. And again, thank you for your hard work, Ms. Hallcroft.
Ms. Wood?
I just wanted to echo everyone's sentiment, say thank you. I had a neighbor who has 5 children come up to me the other day and just go on and on about how great the service has been and how just efficient and generous. And there's a neighbor that she knows that has a child in school but can't get to the site, and that they're able to give her a meal for that person, and she takes them every day. So this is a great service, and I just want to thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, I wish I could have about 40 people up here on camera with me, because that's who I really need to thank.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Bowen?
Thank you. Of course, to be in complete consensus with my colleagues there on the board, I too must add my voice to those that are applauding and thanking the staff and the community who have gone really above and beyond the call of duty in the service to our community. There are so many folk that we just need to thank, and I'm hoping that at some point in our system, we might think of a way that we might, I hate to say add the names, but do something special for these folks, let them know how special they are to us, and that they've been our feet, our voice, and legs and hands and arms when we couldn't go. So at some point, which might be more appropriate than tonight, though we should thank them, and we do, I'd love to have us do something along those lines, Mr. Superintendent, at one of our upcoming meetings. The heroes of the Leon County school system, Team Leon. Thank you all.
I like it. James, again, congratulations and thank you to your staff. Someone else that I need to recognize that's been very instrumental in our food distribution is Dr. Gale. I mean, she has rolled up her sleeves and gone to work countless number of days over the, since this crisis began. She was coordinating farm share events. We have a wonderful partnership with Second Harvest. And I think she even had an event today. So Dr. Gale, I can't thank you enough. I'm amazed by how committed you have been to ensure that needy families in our community are getting the things that they need to sustain themselves during this crisis. So hats off to you, Dr. Gale, and all of your efforts. They have not gone unnoticed. I can assure you that.
Madam Chair, may I quickly, Madam Chair?
Ms. Bowen?
Thank you. May I quickly add to the superintendent's comments that we should not leave out our school board assistant, Ms. Jaleesa Coffey, who has worked herself into a new body size and a total new look out there handing out food, and has been on hand much of the time with Dr. Gale as they went about this community doing those wonderful things. So certainly her name and others will be added along with Dr. Gale's, and we will start calling names and we'll leave folk out, and we don't want to do that, but there are some true heroines and heroes. So at another time, I just needed to put those two together, kind of like peanut butter and jelly. I know you follow me. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
One
that,
more.
Ms. Go, and I should have been the one to do that. Ms. Wood?
Just one more addition to that is the principals at schools where we picked.
Yeah.
I mean, they have gotten triple duty. I know all the principals are working hard, but those principals and staff and custodians and everybody at those particular schools that have been named have really done a great job. So I don't want to leave them out.
Totally.
Thank you. Mr. Superintendent?
Good catch by both of you. So at this time, I'm going to ask Danny Albritton to give us some construction updates, where we are with our current projects and what the forecast is for the future.
Good evening, board, superintendent, and chair. Our construction projects, if there is a silver lining here, this has been a positive. We are now working on unoccupied campuses. We don't have the contractor at Leon High School sharing the parking lot with students with large trucks going in and out. They're moving along with that field in the next week or so. They've got all the dirt out of there. They're putting in their sand soil. Next week or so, they'll be putting their gravel base down, and you'll start seeing the AstroTurf shortly behind that. At Fairview, they had some HVAC equipment that they were going to replace over the summer. They started replacing that, so they'll be ahead of schedule with that project. They're doing a great job down there. If you've been to the Fairview site and you've seen how chopped up the building was, the classroom buildings, now you can see the long straight hallways as they're remodeling that. It's a very nice project. It's going to be a great one at the end of this. At Rickards High School, building 24, they'll be laying ceiling tile in tomorrow. We're scheduled to have the flooring going down the mid-May. So the project's rolling along. They're actually ahead of schedule. So it's been a positive for the construction and facilities department. And all the projects out there being on unoccupied campuses. Okay.
Madam Chair, Mr. Albritton,
Yes, sir.
is the building 24, is that the science building at Rickards?
No, sir. The science building is building 19. That was scheduled to start this summer, and they've already gone in and they've removed all the cabinets, the millwork. They've been demolishing in there, and they're starting to do construction work inside, running new water lines and all. So that was originally scheduled for the summer, but the science wing is going on at this current time. So we're ahead of schedule on it.
So building 24 is which building?
Building 24 is a classroom building. It is building 23 was the first building that the ribbon cutting was on last year.
Yep.
Building 24 is the building directly to the east behind it. So it's the second two-story building in that project.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and Danny will be back with some more good news kind of as a result of those contractors having free reign on those campuses with some good pricing that we received on phase 4C at Rickards, but he'll have a little bit more on that a little later in the meeting. So Mr. Nemmons, you're up. If you'd like to talk about devices and connectivity.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, and superintendent. I hope you don't mind tonight. I'm coming to you as a radio personality versus a TV personality because I don't think you really want to see my video. But I'd like to take this opportunity to update you tonight on the computers and connectivity for the Learning at Home program. For the Learning at Home program to be successful, our students need a mobile device if they don't have one already, and must also have connectivity, which is probably the most difficult issue to solve. So I just wanted to update you on where we are with computers and connectivity for our students while they're learning at home. To date, we've distributed 1,763 devices to students. At the secondary level, that's 928 devices, and at the elementary level, that's 835 devices. For lack of a better term, I've been serving as a computer broker for schools needing mobile devices for their students to learn at home. The devices for students to use at home have come from three primary areas. The first of which is from the school the student attends. Schools have distributed the mobile devices that were in their classrooms and labs to their students. If a school didn't have enough devices to meet their needs of their students, they borrow those devices from other schools that had access devices after they met the needs of their students. We're also very fortunate and thankful for donated devices from the LCS Foundation and other charitable groups in the county. Between schools identifying excess capacity at their school and the LCS Foundation, we've had a total of 359 devices to distribute. As of this morning, we have 100 left. All 179 of the LCS Foundation computers are now claimed by schools, and I'd like to thank Eric Clark for doing that for us, because that's been a very good help, very much helpful. And also to all the charitable
that is great news.
and also to all the charitable organizations that have been aiding this effort throughout Leon County as well. We couldn't do it without you. So once these remaining systems are headed out, we will surpass 1,900 computers deployed to students who did not have a device to use at home. Now, a bigger challenge to learning at home, however, is internet connectivity for those that don't have that connectivity today. We've addressed this issue by contracting 3 different companies in town. First, I would like to speak about is Comcast with their Internet Essentials program. The Internet Essentials program has been available for needy families for quite a few years now. Families can gain high-speed access by completing an application with Comcast. We have committed upfront for 300 families to have access for 6 months. Unfortunately, at this point in time, Comcast, because of their overwhelming response from the pandemic across the United States, is unable to tell us exactly how many families in Leon County schools have signed up for this service, but I suspect we'll learn more about that in the next couple of weeks. In addition, CenturyLink is working with us to provide up to 275 connections for 12 months. To date, 15 families have requested this option. We also have T-Mobile providing mobile cellular hotspots for families that aren't served by companies like Comcast and CenturyLink today. These are families typically found outside the city limits where the internet connectivity can be an issue depending upon where they live. And so far, we've deployed 34 of those devices to our families. So providing connectivity is not without its issues, especially when everyone needed access yesterday, but we're working with our vendors to resolve these issues as fast as humanly possible. And then the last item, I'm going to ask James Cole to speak about the innovative use of buses to aid in internet connectivity as well. So James, it's all yours.
Thanks, Bill. Greetings, Madam Chair, school board members, superintendent. The district identified 15 locations with the highest need for internet access. And my team in transportation worked with Bill Nimmons and his team in TIS to identify 15 buses and equip them with Wi-Fi access and Wi-Fi capabilities. And so the last couple of days, myself and our executive assistant, Ms. Veronica Scott, reached out to all 15 of the locations and visited those locations to meet with the property managers and the staff at those facilities to just kind of share with them the Smart Bus Initiative and some of the benefits and how we look to try to provide access to students that need internet access to do their homework and some of the things that Bill just kind of touched on prior to. And so right now we're waiting for and Bill can probably speak to this, waiting for the activation. Once all of the buses are activated, we will coordinate with the property managers at each location to have the buses on site from 9 a.m. to 3. And then we will pick the buses up at 3, return them back to the compound. So we're excited. We've been able to reach, as I said, all but 2 of the locations, and we have left a couple of messages, even dropped off a couple of letters in the mailbox at those locations. And so we're excited to be able to provide this service and utilize our school buses in a positive way.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Bowen, then Ms. Wood, and then I have a question.
Okay, I have a question. Mr. Cole, could you take just a little bit more of a deeper dive into what actually is going to be happening in these buses? I mean, talk a little bit more about the connectivity so that folk can understand just a little bit clearer what's going to be happening? Will the students be going into the buses? Are they going to plug machines in? Talk a little bit about exactly what the buses are going to be doing and the internet access and what that means, please.
Sure, great question, and my apologies. So the buses have all been equipped with Wi-Fi capabilities. There is a cord at the top of the bus that drops down. We will plug that into a extension cord, and all but 2 of the sites will allow us power sources on the property. And so the students will be provided the Wi-Fi access information so that they can log in. They will not have to get on the bus. You know, we're trying to make sure that we practice social distancing. And so they will be able to access the internet, not having to be on the bus physically. So that's sort of how it works.
Okay. And as a follow-up question, so I have to understand from what you are telling us and what Mr. Timmons is telling us, that every student in Leon County who is in need of and desiring the opportunity for this kind of technology to continue learning in our system will have that at this point?
So again, the locations are within the school district. Where it is our hope, and we have tried to identify, and the superintendent can probably speak a little bit more to it, the locations where we thought we had the greatest need to provide internet access. And so I do have a list, and I can provide the list to the school board of the 15 locations.
Okay. All right. And I guess if I were to ask the question, do we know which students in this county at this time don't have access? That might be another way of asking it, to see what's there, what students have not been served just yet, or the identification of them. So I guess I'm listening for that at some point. And maybe that's what you just said. I'm not certain. Okay.
Hi, this is Bill Nimmons. I would say what we've done is we've, through the schools, have communicated to their students the availability of internet connectivity through various ways what we've talked about here. But do we know exactly which students don't have access? The only thing we've done on that is we had a survey that went out, but of course that depends on how many answered the survey. So to date, I can't answer specifically that these children don't have access. We do not know that.
Okay. All right.
I think just to speak to that a second, Mr. Superintendent, maybe you should. I know that a lot of our teachers know exactly who in their classes they haven't been able to connect with online. So it may be that specific data hasn't reached up the line. I'm sure there are some that may have perhaps not been in touch, but I would hope that our teachers would have that information, Mr. Hanna.
Right. So to kind of add, now that the governor is shut us down for the rest of the year, you know, at first we were kind of hoping against hope that we were going to go back on March the 30th or April the 15th or even May the 1st. And now we realize all bets are off. So we've kind of upped the ante with our game, so to speak, and are looking for even more creative ways to ensure that the vast majority of our students have devices and connectivity. And to Mr. Nimmons' point, they are working through their school principal. Both of those issues, we'll have about 2,000 devices that we've given out to families. We have a number of spots available still through CenturyLink for families that don't have access. These buses are simply vehicles. They're like hotspots. They're vehicles that are going to be going into predominantly Section 8 housing and others where we know we have large concentrations of our students. And then they'll cast a broad network where they can log on and have access if they aren't going through Comcast or CenturyLink or one of those other programs. So we're trying to do as many things as we possibly can. And I think at the end, when and Jillian may talk to this and part of her, part of her presentation, that we are going to debrief on many different issues. This is certainly one of them, the digital divide and connectivity, where we are, what we did well, and what we need, things we need to address in the future as a board and a school system. I think right now we're just doing the best we can to firefight each family situation, given the feedback from the family, from the teacher, and from the site administrator or principal.
And this is great. And did I understand Mr. Nimmons to say that the cost to the families for CenturyLink or Comcast, those costs would be absorbed by donors. There would be no cost to the family, I'm hearing. Am I?
By the district. The district is picking up the cost, right?
Okay.
So we've been approved to move some money around in our title programs.
Yes.
To move some money from Title II to Title IV to help our families with devices and connectivity issues. So we are picking up the cost associated with those families getting both devices and connectivity.
This is wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
My turn?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Wood.
A couple of things. I understand the name of this new program is called the Leon County School Smart Bus. Is that right? No, I like that. And I know we'll be pushing that out through our marketing department. So that's great. And I think that will just serve a lot of people. I'm sort of curious for Mr. Nimmons to comment on how many internet connections are still available but haven't been taken up on. So do you have any insight into that as to why and what we could do to perhaps push that information out a little bit further? There's apparently also some devices that are still available. So I just want to make sure everybody who needs one knows this.
Okay, so on that slide that you have, it says what's left on those. So we still have quite a bit of internet connectivity left. And I, like the superintendent said, I think in my dealings with the principals, if they've requested this, I can tell they are working it hard. And they're literally providing the contact information to me so that we can get it. So I'm thinking if a parent wanted it, they have it. And then we do have some schools that are primarily doing packets and not doing the digital part. So that probably accounts for some of it.
Thank you.
Well, and one thing, Mr. Jones, let's be clear. The directive to the principals were, look, you manage your schools, you manage your sites, but I don't want to see a parent show up at a school board meeting and face us to say, I reached out for help and couldn't get a device and I couldn't get connected. That's unacceptable. And they are well aware of that. And like to Mr. Nimmons' point, I think they are doing a wonderful job of embracing their community and trying to find where the need is.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. Jones, you're next. I had one quick question sort of on the line of, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Along the line that Ms. Bowen raised, which was, no, the students don't have to go sit in the bus, but will they be able to, how far is the distance for the access? Will they be able to get online from their apartment, or do they have to come within proximity of the bus? Do we know that?
So this is Bill Nimmons. The radio signal will, we've been told, and we're testing this now, will radiate 300 feet from the bus. 300 to 800 is what they said. I'm thinking probably more realistically, it's going to be around 300. Whether it actually penetrates into an apartment itself depends upon, the construction of that apartment and things like that. So we don't know, exactly how well that will work going into apartments, but we do know that if they're outside within 300 to 800 feet, hopefully they'll be able to connect.
That seems awfully, I mean, I don't want to second guess you all because I applaud this initiative. I'm just concerned about gathering around the bus, but I'm sure you'll figure that out. I just wanted to, that seems awfully, is that too close? No?
So 300, if you think about it, 300 feet is the length of a football field.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's the length of if they make good on that, if it actually does have that radius, I mean, it's quite a large area. I mean, and we'll see. We've never used this product before. The other good point about it is now that we've retrofitted these buses, when we have field trips or kids are going home, maybe kids on the bus for an hour going home, they can access it while they're to do their homework on the way home. So, these 15 buses as a pilot is a good start, and we'll see how it goes. But nothing ventured, nothing gained, nothing lost, whatever the saying is.
Listen, anything that calls our buses smart, I'm all for. Doesn't that seem like a lifetime ago? All right, Mr. Jones.
Yes, Mr. Superintendent, I noticed when we talked about the additional sites for food services, Are they going to be working in tandem with the smart? Are we going to be using those same locations possibly in tandem, where persons will pick up their food and possibly be served by the internet through these smart buses? And do we also want, or will also be included our 3 public housing sites as a part of these mobile sites that we included? I noticed that I know Weston would serve Orange Avenue, but I had not heard how we were serving Grady Road and Joe Louis, and I wanted to know, will these buses be serving our public housing facilities, and will they be working in tandem with our food locations? Because I am concerned about 100 yards seems rather limited. Did we talk with other jurisdictions that were already using this same technology, and to what effect? So I know that's 3 questions, but I'd like an answer.
Mr. Cole, you want to speak to the locations that you've been visiting?
Just today, we visited Griffin Heights Apartments. We visited Mission Hills Apartments. And also in the last couple of days, Briar Manor Apartments, Glen Oaks, Lakes of San Marco, Leon Arms Apartment, Meadows Trailer Park, Orange Avenue Apartments, Springfield Apartments, Sunrise Place, Windrush Apartments, and then the other 3 locations. The schools are Chairs, Fort Brayton, and Woodville.
So basically what we did, we had Jamie Holloman run a report as to where the greatest concentrations of our students were located. And those were the 12 areas. And then we dispersed ones out to the perimeter at Fort Brayton, Woodville, and Chairs. And then these other 12 locations, and if you know the names of those complexes, they are, the vast majority of them are the places that you were referencing.
I heard them mentioned, so thank you. Now, what about the technology and its efficacy? Did we find out how it was being used successfully in other districts?
This is Bill Nimmons. I can answer that question. Yes, if you do a search, Google search for school bus Wi-Fi, you will see many cases of districts across the United States using this to serve their needy populations. So we did do our research. It is an emerging technology, and we're going to learn things just like they've learned things as well. But what we saw is they had success. So that's why we went that direction as well.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to make certain that I appreciate the innovation, and as I've said before, I'm grateful for the genius to give us the biggest bang for our buck and be enormously impactful for the populations that we endeavor to serve.
Is that all, Mr. Jones?
Yes, so thank you. I'm delighted to know that it's been effective in other areas. So I look forward to its impact in our community as well.
Okay, great. Ms. Striplin and then Ms. Wood.
Thank you. So the radius around the bus of how wide a net it casts, we heard about the size of a football field. Is that what we're? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay. And does that mean the bus driver is going to stay on the bus? Is the bus just going to be left there unoccupied for lengths of time? What does that look like?
So we have all but 2 buses. We have the capability of plugging into a power source outside. We have them located as such that our project managers will periodically throughout the day go and just check and see how everything is going. But we will not have an attendant there all day with the bus. The buses that will have to run on the battery of the bus, those will have to probably get by a little bit more frequently just to crank the bus and make sure that it's still working properly. So we will have a regular rotation of our project managers that will go out to each location and just check in to make sure that everything's going well and there are no issues.
Okay. Are we talking about leaving them there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or are we like a Monday through Friday? Or they come back to the compound at night?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. So it'd be Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 is the schedule that we have in place now. They would return to the compound in the afternoon, and so we'll sort of continue that process until we're instructed otherwise.
Okay. And we're talking about summer. We're talking about this is kind of continuing into the summer months, or
right now, we're just trying to get to May 29th. And after May 29th, we can kind of reevaluate where we are and adjust. And the reason, the 9 to 3, we don't want to leave them there overnight for fear of vandalism.
Sure.
Buses are expensive, but
Yeah.
I don't think in the middle of the day, someone's going to vandalize them. And
Right.
look, this is a pilot. We haven't done this. We did the research, though. I think it's worth the effort. It wasn't a ton of money to prop this up, and we'll see how it goes.
So I want to stress again, and I raised this just a tiny bit yesterday about the lack of Mr. Cole and Mr. Nimmons have seen it, and everyone knows that it's twofold here. It's the device in addition to the capability of getting the internet to some of these neighborhoods and some of these families. But I would like for us to seriously consider borrowing money and buying devices for every child who needs one in our district. Other districts are doing it. They're really stepping out there. And it's costly, but even just my agency, we bought them at $169 a piece. $169 for one kid is life-changing. And even those kids that say they have one in the house, they're sharing them 4 and 5 siblings or whoever's coming over, and the device is possibly years old, and they're not able to really function and utilize it. They're left behind socially, they're isolated, while the kids that have all these devices and all these capabilities, they're connecting with each other. They're playing games, they're chatting, they're watching videos, their horizons are being expanded, and that gap is only going to become larger and larger and larger. And without that device, we can say all they need is a cell phone all day long, but it's not the same. They can't make those connections. So not only is it education, but it's a mental health component that we're going to help by looking into borrowing money and buying devices for our kids. And not every kid would need one. A lot of our families have them. And this would be on need. But we're going to watch that gap grow, and we're going to watch those kids who don't have a device continue to fall behind academically. And I would hope that we can have that conversation. The money is never cheaper to borrow. Now is the time. There's a lot of resources out there to try to help us get through that. And we have not taken out new debt. And since I've been on the board, I don't think we've really put our resources. Superintendent's done a great job of monitoring our money and making sure that we are financially sound, and we are. And in any other day and age, would I have ever thought I would, want to borrow money to give just to hand out laptops? Never. But this is not any other day. This is not any other age. And I hope we never see this again in our life. But my fear is that, as people start to fatigue of staying home and going back out, and we've all heard the possibility of this second wave. So, what if 8-10 months down the road, we do see a second wave and we do have to send everybody back home, and we're back in this same boat, and we say, well, we should have done that, because now our kids are accountable. You have a device, we gave it to you. And we expect you to be responsible, and we're holding you accountable for your academics because we know you have that device. And that's going to put us in so much better shape, and it's going to put our children in so much better shape at that point. I hope that never happens. I really do. And I'm sure there's some legalities that we need to look at. And we could offer incentives. Hey, if you return this device in a year, you get $50 back, whatever it is. But I really, really think we should consider this as an option for our kids.
Sure.
Ms. Wood, and then Mr. Jones.
2 or 3 things. One, just to respond to Ms. Strickland, I really agree that we need to look at whatever we can do to make sure everyone has a device in their hand. I do think we need to probably get a workshop from Mr. Nimmons, because I called him about raising money for buying devices, and some are compatible with our schools and can be supported and some aren't. So that's another discussion, but they're a little more expensive, but then the school board owns them and that sort of thing. So, but we can have that discussion later. The concept, the idea, I completely agree with. Some technical questions I have. When students sign in on the Smart Bus, will they be signing in with their Leon County school password? In other words, is it available? Is it just for kids, or is it for everybody in the neighborhood? I'd like to know that. And I'll start with that one.
Okay, this is Bill Nimitz again. So you don't actually sign in to the Wi-Fi. I mean, as a student ID, it's going to have, you know how at home when you see home network or something like that, they call it the SSID. They will see an SSID called LCS Smart Bus, and then they will need to have a password to gain access to the Wi-Fi.
Okay, thank you. I figured it was something like that. And we also talked at an earlier time about people being able to drive into the parking lot of a school, sit in their car and use the school Wi-Fi. Is that available at most schools? Can you give me just sort of a rundown on that?
Yes. So as long as the parking lot's open, it depends upon the school how far that signal radiates out, but typically it does seem to cover parking lots as long as they're not way far away from the building.
Okay, that might be something that we want to let people know where, leave that up to the superintendent, but everybody knows where their school is, and some people could do that, if they stay in their car and keep social distance. The third thing, we've talked about a lot of numbers, which I really appreciate getting these numbers. For each of these reports, could we get a follow-up, just a short written report with the numbers and bullets, because it's hard to do this video and take all these notes. So I would appreciate the written report tomorrow, a summary of what people have said, because there's a lot of good information here that I'd like to share.
I agree.
Totally. I'll stop writing. Maybe.
Okay, Mr. Jones?
Is that okay? Can we have that?
Sorry,
I am.
Ms. Wood?
I'm sorry.
Ms. Wood, were you finished? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Yes, one of the things that Mr. Nimitz mentioned when he talked about these different providers, CenturyLink, T-Mobile, and others. I am also interested in us pursuing possibly a relationship with a local vendor, Figures Wireless.
Yeah.
Many of you will remember Mr. Freddie Figures was one of the philanthropists who has supported our Title I schools. He also has his own technology business, his own cell phone company, and I know that he is interested in collaborating. He's also the one that many of you may have read about just the other day, who donated more than $700,000 worth of PPEs to hospitals and federally qualified health centers across the state of Florida in an effort to mitigate. He's a good man and he's interested in working with us. And I'd like for this conversation, Mr. Nimitz, to reach out to that company and find out how they might be engaged in terms of what could be long-term and sustainable relationships and meeting the needs of the technology needs of children and families that we're trying to serve in the district.
Great idea, Mr. Jones. I remember him. Yes.
Yes, sir. I'll make sure I follow up on that.
Thank you.
So are we ready to move on to the next item? I think there are a number of them.
Where are we?
There
Well,
are.
not the next item. The next item on the
We're on, right. Let's see, there are 13, and that was number
3.
That was number 3 and 4. I'm gonna adjust the agenda if that's okay. Eric Clark, since we're talking about computers and you kind of fit into this project, will you jump on now and give an update of all the wonderful things you've done with the foundation to help in this effort?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Madam Chair Rasmussen and board members from Superintendent Hannah. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. We've started a program that we're calling Bridging the Digital Divide, and its purpose, quite honestly and quite simply, is just what it says, is we want to be able to help those young people who do not have internet access and or do not have laptops to be able to provide those to as many as we can. The goal is to raise as many dollars as we possibly can. There will be no administrative costs. The dollars raised will go right to purchasing laptops. To date, as Mr. Nimitz said, 179 have been bought and distributed by the foundation. We have another 21 HPs that are that have been purchased. They've just not been delivered yet. just sent out the PO on that one. So that will be a total of 200. To date, we have spent $59,569.48 on those 200 laptops. To date, we have raised $61,408.32. So we've got a little over $2,100 left. Haven't purchased any other ones because, quite honestly, wanted to see if there were some other peripheral items that may come that kids may need, that Mr. Nimmons may need to purchase in terms of headphones or microphones or whatever. That is not my area of expertise, nor do I claim for it to be. That way, my role in this is basically to raise some money, purchase the computers, and get them in the hands of Mr. Nimmons, and then he gets them in the hands of the students. This campaign is ongoing. We have links on our Facebook and our Twitter, as well as our webpage, that people can donate. And we're also selling some signs in conjunction with fast signs to raise money as well. Haven't sold as many as we would like, but it's still new and the word hasn't gotten out there probably to the degree that it needs to. I know that Heather Thomas has sent out a press release to the newspaper telling about the program. So hopefully that'll hit the newspaper here in the next few days. The laptops that we have purchased are what Mr. Nimmons recommended, which it's like Mrs. Wood said, there's all ranges of them. And these were the ones that he felt had the best opportunity to work at the school as well as at the students' homes. And they are a little bit more expensive. They run about $300 a piece. The first ones I bought were $292, and the last ones I bought were $304. They were two different brands. So $300 is a good ballpark, but that's sort of what we're doing, and we're going to plug along. And if folks want to donate, we will sure put their money to good use.
Mr. Jones?
Mute, Daryl.
You're muted.
Unmute. There you go.
Hello. Mr. Clark, thank you for a fantastic report. Colleagues, I called Dr. Gale a couple of weeks ago and asked that this report be included as a part of our meeting today. I am, as I often am known to say, I'm deliciously proud of the fantastic work of the foundation. Their work in helping to mitigate what we knew was an ever-present need has just been remarkable. The large gift that they got from Envision, the way they are now starting this new campaign with fast signs, which I've been delighted to share on my page, and also provide the links for the contributions to be made through for these laptops and other technology that we're making available for our children. I'm just excited about the work that the foundation is doing and how responsive it is even during this pandemic. We have seen the goodwill of our community. Our colleague, Alba Strickland, and her own work with Big Brothers Big Sisters has done a fantastic job of providing technology for the children that she serves, many of whom are enrolled in Title I schools across our community. And they too are being served here through another worthwhile endeavor. Our community has been more than generous and more than responsive, and I think that they will continue to do so as long as we continue to keep our foot on the gas and remind them of the ever-present need that our children need, because they too, our community realizes the important value that helping them to become lifelong learners will have impact in our community exponentially. So thank you, Mr. Clark, for the great work that you and others are doing. I couldn't be more delighted and more proud, and particularly how we're serving children from across the entire width and breadth of our Leon County School District.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jones. I appreciate those kind words. And I just want to let everyone know that my board of directors did not hesitate when we transferred some money from one account to another to do this, and then as well as the gifts that we were able to get from Envision as well as a private foundation. So the board of directors for the foundation gets all the credit. They were the ones who were able to make sure that this plan moved along smoothly, and they are committed to that as well as to anything else that the school system needs. You just need to let us know what you need, and the foundation is here to help.
We appreciate that very much, Mr. Clark. Our partnership has been off to a tremendous start since you came on board, and we look forward to many more great things. Mr. Superintendent, you ready to move on to the next item?
I am, Madam Chair. At this time, though, I would also like to say something before I forget by the end. Those of you on our team that presented tonight information, if you would send a synopsis of your notes to Dr. Gale so she can be sure to disseminate it out to all the board members. It doesn't have to be a thesis, but just make sure you're capturing everything that you said here. Send it to Dr. Gale so she can get it out to the 5 board members. I wanted to make sure I said that before I didn't say that. So at this time, Jillian Gregory, if you would give the board an update on your plans for the future.
Good evening, everyone. It is so very good to see all of you. I think it's been several weeks, and so I just want to let you know that my heart, it feels full because I've missed all of you. And so I was out for the good of the group for about a month and a half before on leave, and so this has been an extended break from me. So get ready for lots of words, and I hope that in Mr. Jones's comments that they're impactful and meaningful and hopeful as you navigate our community. I have a couple of updates. The first update has to do with the pandemic and where we are in terms of instruction. We are currently sitting in what I consider pandemic 1.0 and phase 2 of pandemic 1.0. And so that is, we had phase 1, which was the first 2 weeks of return to school, which was that March 31st to April, those weeks of March 31st to April 6th. And those were district developed packets that were distributed either electronically or in paper format by our schools, and provided instructional review opportunities for our students to re-engage in the content that had been taught in the core content areas previously that year. And then beginning on April 13th, teachers took back control. Some of them took it back somewhat earlier, but with what we consider phase 2, which was the teacher-led instruction. And as part and parcel of that, that's really where we saw the feedback that, some teachers kind of just pivoted their classroom to an online version of their classroom, which included lots of assignments and lots of resources. And so some of that feedback that we got, that there was a lot of different places to go. And then all the way through to today, and our last Saturday, when it was announced by the governor that we would continue this plan until the end of the year. We were prepared for that. Under the leadership of the superintendent, before March 13th, he asked us to make sure that we were positioned, that should schools be shuttered, that we would be able to respond as swiftly and nimbly as possible. And so we've done that in terms of both the district level packets for phase 1 and then phase 2, which is the current teacher-led instruction. As part of all of that pandemic 1.0, and you'll see in a few minutes why I refer to that as 1.0, some questions have come up regarding workload, right? And so we've been working with our school administrators and our teachers on what is a reasonable amount of work, right? So we can't really just take 60 minutes of instruction, 6 periods a day, and turn that to our platforms and expect our students to engage. It's too much work. And so we've really been working with our school principals on balancing and understanding what an appropriate amount of workload is. We've talked about refining our practices, right? So beginning on April 13th and beyond, really talked about what does it look like to be an online teacher? Because our teachers are face-to-face teachers. And so they are flexing their muscles as it relates to gaining new skills and using technology we had available in the district in new and innovative ways. And so we've been working through that. As part of all of that work, questions about grading have come up, right? And so what does grading look like in this era? And so over the last several weeks, we have been working to identify meaningful and appropriate grading practices for these 4th 9 weeks that really reflect both the superintendent's vision, but also what I've heard in your comments, the school board's vision for grace, flexibility, and compassion, really honing in and defining what that is. And so what we've done is we've reviewed the practices in other states and in other school districts in the state of Florida. We've spoken with the Department of Education, and we've surveyed what other practices were being used and implemented around. And then we developed a work group under the guidance of the superintendent of school principals, including Title I and non-Title I principals from the elementary, middle, and high school level. We presented all of the ideas to them, all of the practices, and then asked them to identify one practice that we would implement district-wide, so we would have consistency. That was one of the questions or comments that we received feedback on very early in the process was this: our community wanted consistency in how we were going to do grading for the fourth 9 weeks. And so from that principal work group, we developed the following recommendation for grading for the fourth 9 weeks in Leon County schools. Students will continue to work in the fourth 9 weeks and will generate a grade in the fourth 9 weeks based on their work in the fourth 9 weeks. Students or teachers are in contact with one another. Assignments are being provided by the teachers. There is an expectation that students will remain engaged and continue to work throughout the course of the fourth 9 weeks. Any student who has not been contacted by their teacher, or any teacher who has not had contact with the student, needs to be elevating that non-contact to the school principal, because we have mechanisms in place to either provide management or to provide intervention for in either situation. But students are going to be doing the fourth 9 weeks work and submitting it. Teachers are going to be grading that fourth 9 weeks work, and they're going to be submitting those grades in focus. At the end of the fourth 9 weeks, our plan is to look at the fourth 9 weeks grade and compare that grade to the average of the first 3 quarters grades. So we have 135 days of instruction with grades associated with that. So we're going to take those grades and at the quarter grades, average them, compare them to the fourth 9 weeks grade, and whichever grade is higher, apply it to the student for the fourth 9 weeks. So that in the end, the highest grade will prevail for the student. What we fully recognize is that no student has asked to be part of a pandemic as part of their educational experience. The superintendent and you have been very committed to making sure that children are given grace, families are given space and flexibility to work through this new and uncomfortable period of time that we're in. And so through the collaboration of our work group of principals, and then all of the principals that when this was rolled out and we solicited feedback from, this is the grading practice that we would like to move forward with. And so with that being said, this would be applied for students in the fourth 9 weeks K-12 in our school district.
Jillian, may I ask a question? All of us, I think, have talked individually to the superintendent about this, and or you. And first of all, I don't know if you were on the beginning of the call. Ms. Bowen, you might want to mute. Where I was able to thank you for the Herculean efforts that you and your staff have made over this entire ordeal, I guess is an appropriate term. Excuse me. My concern, though, here is I didn't hear you mention anything about looking at effort in the fourth 9 weeks. So if a student is not trying at all, and the average of their first 3 9 weeks is fairly high, what is the rationale for that? I'm wondering how we can give credit for effort and not overly penalize, because I do want to acknowledge that for many families, this has been a very, very difficult time.
So that's a great question. And, we have wrestled with this as well, right? And so really the question is, it gets to student motivation, right? So why, if a student is a high achieving student, could they coast in the fourth 9 weeks, not submit any work, and then essentially get the average of the fourth 9 weeks grade? The first 3 9 weeks grade. And the answer is quite simply, yes, they could. With that being said, however, there are many reasons why students need to continue to be engaged. Those include topics in and around academic eligibility, extracurricular eligibility, scholarships, class ranking, and course placement. We are in the process of doing course placements for students for the 2021 school year. So students who are in advanced placement and honors coursework need to maintain GPAs, they need to maintain the effort that they have undertaken so far this year. So while on the surface, it seems like, students can play a game, at the end of the day, though, there are certainly other motivating factors for why students need to continue to do the work, least of which is that their teachers are covering standards that they need to understand and know before they move on to the next grade level. Our teachers have done an amazing job working with their students to make sure that they are learning those skills and those standards, right? So we have not abandoned any sense of expectations for what is to be covered in the standards for the fourth 9 weeks. We have instructional pacing guides that the district has provided, and we have schools that have their own instructional pacing guides. And so they have a plan for the fourth 9 weeks, and those teachers and the students are working. Now, I will say that we are very concerned when a student who has previously been engaged ceases to be engaged. That is actually a significant characteristic of a child who's experiencing depression or other social emotional issues. And so really, work is important, but when a student stops working, that's really where, as teachers and as school communities, we need to engage with families to make sure that the child and the family is okay. And so I think, to answer your question, like superficially, absolutely, but a student can stop working any 9 weeks and ride on the coattails of the semester average or any of those other ways that student course grades are calculated. But in this environment, we really are using engagement to help address the students.
And I want to make sure that we preserve enough flexibility for those students who may, in fact, be having a mental health crisis or their family. Yeah. On the other hand, there was an article in the paper today, I don't remember which publication, but it was like a parent, I can't do this anymore, I'm done.
The Times, yes.
And so, what concerns me in terms of just a blanket statement like, well, we'll take the average of your first 3 quarters, is in fairness to teachers too, because if a student is being promoted into one of the state testing grades next year, let's say you've got a 9th grader going into 10th grade, and they don't have the fundamentals that they need going from 9th grade to 10th grade or 2nd grade to 3rd grade, I'm really concerned about having just a full-blown, nothing about effort. And I don't know if such a proposal would be consistent with our policy, but I'll leave that to a later conversation.
I'm sorry. So we typically in our district do not actually grade effort. There's a part of the report card that addresses those kinds of skills like effort, behavior in those areas. So grades are not specifically addressing effort. Now, I think what you're suggesting, or my proxy, is that if a student says, I don't have to do this anymore, why am I engaging? Why do I need to even try? I think that's really your concern and gaming the system. And quite honestly, the students have been engaged for 4 or 5 weeks, right? We're in, I think, like dog years, like 97th week of this. And so, but they have been engaged. And so really the message has been, do your work, get your work in. So if something changes today because of what we're saying in the school board meeting or what's going to be published in the paper, that really is an opportunity for our teachers and our administrators to work with the students and re-engage them. Our students have either been engaged or not been engaged for 5 weeks now or 4 weeks now. And so this determination, I don't think, is going to make a fundamental sea change in whether or not the students continue to work. But if it does, it would require one of 2 things. Either is there something social emotionally we need to be connected to, or is it something that we need to address with parents in terms of when students slack off in the classroom, and we would treat it no differently.
All right. Do other board members have comments or questions on this particular piece of the topic? I think I see Ms. Wood, Ms. Striplin. Okay, I think everybody does. So we'll start with Ms. Wood, then Ms. Striplin, then Ms. Bowe, and then Mr. Jones. I'm just going in the order of your little boxes on the Hollywood squares here.
Okay. I really hear your point, Mr. Rasmussen, and we do want to make sure that everyone is making an effort. And I think that if we find out that someone is making 0 effort, then that definitely calls for a mental health intervention of some sort, using our social workers or our mental health counselors, because most kids are, I'm going to assume the best here, are trying. And of course, we've known about students that sometimes coast in the last 4 weeks. It's not a new phenomenon in secondary school. But I really think this is an important message to let everyone know what the rules are. I think there's been a lot of anxiety about students, some who haven't been able to get the assignment in time, and they see a 0 on their grade, and it causes a lot of anxiety. And we don't need that right now. We've been telling them we're going to give you grace and flexibility, but for me, this new policy defines what that means, because grace means a different thing to different people. And so by by reassuring them that they can improve their grade, that if they work hard, they can bring up their GPA, but they're not going to fall lower than the average of what they have done the other 3 quarters. I think that's really fair. And I think it's going to bring some relief in our homes, especially there are people scrambling, you know, with 5 and 6 kids and 1 device. And we want them just to try. So to your point, we want to make sure they're trying. And if they're not, we need to do an intervention. But I really feel strongly that we need to announce this policy, and also that so that teachers understand this, because we don't want to blindside teachers about grading. So I think if everyone knows what the rules of the game are, we'll just be so much better off. The other thing I have said to Superintendent and Ms. Gregory is I would really like there to be an understanding with teachers that if students haven't turned work in yet, that it shows up as an incomplete versus a 0, because a 0 can be very discouraging. And we don't know sometimes why the student hasn't turned it in yet. They may be, you know, like the student I told you about yesterday, sitting on the side of the road at Taco Bell so they can get internet service so they can complete their work on their phone. There's just all kinds of variety out there. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I really agree with this policy and appreciate it.
And just to clarify, it's not coming to us as a policy. This is a part of a report. So if we need to amend the policy, that would be something that would need to be advertised, or under maybe there's some emergency protocols. But I don't disagree that we need to be clear about expectations sooner rather than later. But I think this is a tough needle to thread, because I know probably all of you have had the same kind of phone calls I have, which have been from one extreme to the other. From one, I haven't, you know, I've got 2 kids and they haven't heard from any of their 12 teachers, all the way to we're overwhelmed and this is unreasonable and we can't keep up. So I'm just concerned about that. Okay, Ms. Striplin, then Ms. Bowen, then Mr. Jones.
Thank you. And I think, you know, I'm hearing a lot of the same sentiments that I have. You know, what is define grace? We're, you know, grace, flexibility, along with accountability, but a lot of our parents want that very clearly defined. So the sooner, I love, Roseanne always puts everything so eloquently. It's so great. I just write down what she says and then say it again. What are the rules? You know, let's get those rules out to our parents as soon as possible, because there's a lot of anxiety out there about, you know, about what if, you know, and if we look at the circumstances that our kids are under right now, I mean, even my own house, we have an 8th grader, so I know exactly what's going on. He is extremely self-motivated, and there's only one of him, you know, the rest are in college. And so I've ran into friends, you know, and they're trying to work from home and they've got 3 kids, and we have single parents. They're shuttled from one house to the next, and they're trying to, you know, this parent tries to keep up with it this week and then communicate maybe or maybe not with the other parent, you know, all the way down to our homes that have no devices and multiple siblings, and you know, losing jobs and food insecurity. I mean, the list of problems that our families are facing, it just keeps going and going and going. I heard a horrible statistic, you know, because of my role with a nonprofit, and we all share stories of what the other nonprofits are hearing. And one of them was about spouse abuse. They get the most calls on Monday from women who are in an abusive home because the husband has gone to work on Monday, and that is their time to reach out. Average of 40 calls a day. Right now it's down to three calls, because husband is home and they no longer feel safe to make that phone call. This is what's happening in our households. This is what's happening with losses of jobs, losses of wages, no unemployment being issued, lack of food, and then kids running around to boot. So I want to make sure that those kids are not penalized. Those kids are going to go on to the next grade next year with their, you know, with their peers. The kids, the overachievers, they're going to continue to overachieve. God love them. They are, you know, they're going to do it regardless. And then we've got the middle bunch. They're going to make it through and they're going to be fine. And then there are these children that are struggling with things in their households that some of us can't even come to grips with. So when that kid is identified you know, and the principal knows, okay, this kid has completely disengaged, you know, what is the plan for that child? That's the children that I'm worried about. Those are the children I want to make sure that, okay, well, here's another opportunity for you. I mean, under what circumstances are we going to hold a child behind? Are we going to hold a child back after this school year? That's what I want to know. Specifically, you know, for those that are facing the most extreme situations at home, you know, what is the plan for those children? And those are the ones that I'm most worried about. The rest of it, they're going to catch up. They're going to be fine. The whole country is in the same boat. But those are the ones that I'm worried about the most. So I'd like to know kind of what's the plan for that. What's plan B and plan C and plan D to try to get them to where they need to be in August.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Bowen is next, but I think Ms. Gregory has something she wanted to interject.
As a point of clarification, do you want me to just take notes and then answer everything together, or do you want me to answer them individually? What's your preference, ma'am?
I think maybe if you don't mind taking notes and giving us one closing, that might be easier. Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I did tell everything that everyone has said. And we all are so new at this. We've not had to do anything like this before. And so I need to applaud Jillian and staff and superintendent for what they're doing, and the parents and the community as well, as helping us with this as we educate our children. But one of the things that I would like for us to be very clear about, and it's probably been stated before, that whatever we do, we need to be very clear and not send any mixed messages about what it is we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. Because I think often we get mixed messages from the state and the federal, and often it leaves us in a bit of a loop and being anxious. I guess one of the things that I would love to have happen, and I understand how we're trying to reach that balance, Jillian, you know, from the 2/3 of the first 6 weeks, and now we're pulling in together that fourth 6 weeks and trying to find that balance. But to continue to be sure that we're informing the parents of what we're doing and give whatever we're doing more teeth, so that it does not rest on us in that we have left a child behind. You know, we need to look at all of the different interventions that we can bring to bear to make certain that all of our children are continuing to learn. Or if we discover that they are not, then what interventions do we have in place to pull them to where they need to be? I mean, if it's depression, and we know that they are, and we know that there are many ills out there in society that are causing them not to learn. So I'm listening for the kind of interventions or strategies that we may be pulling together as a system to help little Joy, who is not turning in her assignments, or who may not be doing what she needs to do, to determine that she still understands that her teachers are there for her, or we are there for her, and we want her to be where she's going to be next year. I think that many of our parents, and you've already mentioned many of the things that cause us to be where we are today, but to just be clear in what we're doing, and to make sure that the work that we expect them to do is clear, and continue to, I guess, press forward, because all of this is not going to go away. And I'm also listening for, what are we going to be doing in August? We probably don't even know that yet. We've not, I guess, really had any directions. We have some expectations. So just to keep driving and being informed that we're doing the best we can, and that we're finding a way to grade students, and that we're not talking about pass fail, you know, because that's been a question on the minds of some folks. So to keep that curriculum message as clear and as direct as we can, and continue to be able to give it to parents. And I'm certain it's already on the website, so just needed to throw that in there. That's it for now.
What's on the website, Ms. Bowen? You need to unmute.
The expectations, if it's on the school's website, you know, of what it is you need to do to follow the policies and the procedures so that your child can know what he or she needs to do. If they don't get the packets anymore, then they are online. This kind of the kind of activities that they can engage in to continue to keep up with their lessons. That's what I'm trying to say. But information to keep it out there so that parents can know. And we don't have parents coming back to us and superintendent said, well, I didn't know about it and nobody contacted me. And we run some risk of that. And I think that our parents are very attentive for the most part, but occasionally to know if there are students that are falling through the crack. And that would be a question that I would have. Do we now know whether or not there are students that have not been as attentive to what the superintendent staff has been working so diligently to provide? And if so, what are the plans for seeking those students out? I mean, do we have our truant officers going out there, or who checks? That's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Jones?
Yes, this goes, Jillian, as we talk about the grading system going forward, what has been the engagement with our principals? I can imagine that different schools, particularly based upon the engagement of their student populations and parents, different schools have different responses, different protocols. I know we're using different types of technologies. Some are paper-based. How do with that milieu of a variety of experiences, how do we have any uniformity in putting grades forward that will be a reflection of student effort, achievement, activity, and the like, with so many different protocols? How does that occur? And then how is that communicated to parents and students subsequently, such that they know, for lack of a better word, what their anticipated grade is in this new context?
Okay, I think Jillian, you can respond.
Thank you so very much. So I took some notes on some questions, and so I'm just going to go ahead and begin. I think the question I got was, how do we know that students are being reached? And so what does that look like? And what I can tell you that without exception is that our schools have done an amazing job reaching out. The superintendent was clear. The 2 weeks from March 31st to April 6th, the expectation was that every student was to be contacted by every teacher. Now, the flip side of that coin is some of the feedback that you may have heard, right? And because I too have received it. If I get one more remind text about X, if I get one more email, parents were getting inundated with communication. On one extreme. On the other end, I've never heard from my child's teacher, right? And so during that 2-week period, when the feedback came to the district office, from you, school board members, and from, portals like the community information portal, from direct emails to us, we worked those issues with schools and with principals, right? Our principals are the leaders of their community, and we have schools who by April 6th had 100% of their students they were in contact with. We have schools that have 98%, right? There are very few schools that have identified students they have not been able to get in contact with. Now, what I want to be clear about is that some of the contact is on phone, because the families are first responders or essential workers, and they've sent their children to go live with somebody in another state or another community. And so the contact is slightly different than somebody who's right now in town. But what we've done is, and I'm thinking of very specific examples, we've mailed packets, we've sent work, the online content has been really helpful. And so for those students, even in those instances where the students are not physically in Leon County right now, we are still serving our students. That's the beautiful thing about online learning, is that you can be separated by distance and you can be separated by time, and students can still engage. Now, there are some students who we have not been successful in reaching. And so those look like, and to Ms. Bowen's point later on, but I also think that Ms. Striplin mentioned this, we have sent, our teachers have done to house visit. We've had teachers, administrators, reading coaches, principals, social workers, all doing house visits, right? We're tracking down students. Where are they? We are following our procedures in terms of intervention. And so for us, what it looks like is we are doing an amazing job. I mean, truly, I think within the first week of returning to school, that March 31st week, I think virtually all of our teachers were reporting that they had been in contact with their students, as it was reported through the principals to the district staff. So we do have practices of reaching out. We do have practices where administrators, people are going to people's houses. That was slightly before the order changed, so that we discontinued that practice. Because of social distancing but we remain committed to the students. While mental health is not necessarily my lane, I do know that Dr. Cox and his team have done an amazing job providing for mental health services to our students through our schools. Our principals have identified families who are in need of additional support in that way. We have guidance counselors who are working with families. We have Disc Village who are working with families. We have our general community who supports our students' mental health, and that has not gone away. It may look different, but we still have Ms. Fitzgerald and those individuals who are providing that support to our students. And so in regards to reaching our students, we are pulling every lever in the book, and our principals are social media savvy. And one of the things that we do K-12 is we use social media to our benefit. And I know it's a very important part of marketing, but we use it to track down kids and families and neighbors and see who knows who. And so we're getting answers. Are we perfect? No. And I would never suggest that we are, but I would say that we are using every lever in our toolkit to reach out and to work with students and to engage students. Ms. Striplin asked a retention question, and that is on our academic services to-do list. There was a lot of confusion, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, regarding comments that Governor DeSantis made. And so just for the good of the order, for everyone listening and watching, the governor has suspended the requirements for promotion associated with the 3rd grade and the 10th grade assessments. So what that means is students in 3rd grade are not required to pass the FSA in order to be promoted to 4th grade. In the state of Florida, in normal times, they are. And so those students who are in 3rd grade who were in danger of being retained solely because of the FSA, not because of other data points, but solely their data points were fine, but the FSA would have been their trigger to be retained or go to Summer Reading Academy. Because that assessment does not exist, we are to treat the retention as if the assessment didn't exist. But to be clear, we have 135 days of data. We weren't in school for 3 weeks and it ended. We had far more data points. Short of it being in May, this was not the beginning of the year, or even the middle of the year. And so students who are in danger of being retained, we have practices aligned in academic services and at the principal level where parents are communicated with often. The state requires that any student who's in danger of being retained be communicated with in 3rd grade, at least in terms of a 3rd grade substantial reading deficiency letter. And through our principals, no decision, I never want to say never, but it is best practice to make promotion and retention decisions over the course of a year, not because of 9 weeks. And so I think I heard some concern from Ms. Bowen that, students who were doing okay or were kind of doing okay, but then fell off in the 4th 9 weeks, were they going to be retained? They are our most at-risk students. And the answer is the decision to promote or retain a student is based on so many data points, some of which do come from the 4th 9 weeks, but by far, most of them come from those first 135 days of the school year. And so, we would not be retaining a student because of the 4th 9 weeks. We would, however, potentially retain a student for whom the entire year demonstrated a retention was necessary. And that retention would be predicated on the communication between the parents, the school, the teachers, the administrator, right? So our students, so retention really happens in K-8. In high school, students get moved because of credits, right? You move from a freshman to a sophomore. Students aren't retained as freshmen. But so really for K-8, for those students, our principals work tirelessly with students who are in danger of being retained from the very first data point in August or September. students are identified through any number of assessments. And so we do have data. We do have data that parents and school board employees, teachers, administrators, reading coaches, math coaches, school psychologists, school counselors, the families on. So I want to be super clear. There could be retentions, but those retentions were based on data that was well before the pandemic, well during the 135 days, and that no child would necessarily be retained because of the pandemic. And particularly with the grading policy, the grading practice, really trying to say that we recognize that for our families who are from soup to nut, all of our families are experiencing trauma right now. And this is a collective national trauma. And we are working to thread the needle on finding balance, ensuring and messaging to students and families. The 4th 9 weeks matters, your grades matter, but in the end, communicate with your teachers, work with your school, and we have a safety net. I think that was one of the concern or questions that were brought up. Another one had to do with communication. And as the superintendent,
Excuse me, before you move on away from retention, did the governor's order say that a parent could request and require that their child be voluntarily retained? Do you remember?
Yes. So I've listened. Yes. Thank you, School Board Chair Rasmussen. So there was some confusion in, I want to say like the March 17th or 18th press conference from Governor DeSantis. There were 3 sentences. I've watched this a lot where he went back and forth, where he specifically was talking about school grades. And when he talked about school grades, he was talking about the school grading, not grades in the classroom. He was saying that school grades would be waived, right? So we know, because we're in the industry, that the school grades that are being waived are, Child's High School's letter grade, Kate Sullivan's letter grade, Pine View's letter grade. That's what he was waiving. So when he said school grades are waived, he was really referencing that. The second piece was that he was talking about testing requirements for promotion, like that 3rd grade requirement, and the graduation requirement associated with the 10th grade FSA. So what he said is students who are seniors who have not yet, he didn't say this, but essentially students who have not yet passed the 10th grade FSA requirement, for those seniors who would be graduating this year, that assessment is waived. And so we're going to act as if those 2 assessments did not exist. And so that is what he was waiving. So again, it was the state assessments that he was waiving, and it was school grades associated with the accountability system in the state of Florida. But I also just want to let you know that I asked lots of people to watch the video, but I also reached out to the Department of Education and asked them for some clarification. And so in coordination with the Department of Education, they were clear that retention or promotion of any student is always a collective decision where parents and school community members like teachers, administrators, and reading coaches work collaboratively to make a determination about school promotion or retention, a student promotion or retention.
Okay, so a parent can collaborate with the school in this decision, but they can't demand, I guess, if it's the professional opinion of the educators involved, that the student be retained.
So we would encourage our schools, and I had a conversation with a school just this evening before the board meeting. If a parent is asking for a child to be retained who is does not have any indicators for retention, that we would ask that the school, in academic services, that we would ask the school to bring together the parents in the school community, including the teacher, the administrator, the guidance counselor, and really kind of suss out what is the parent concern, right? So is it?
It could be the trauma.
It could be the trauma. There's so many different things. It could be that, the child, there could be any number of things that a parent brings forward. They could be, I think that we've talked before, like divorce rates are going to skyrocket after the pandemic, right? All these kinds of things. And so the decision to retain a student has to be made with seriousness, because there are significant long-term implications for a child who is retained. And then up to and including identity issues about self-esteem and self-worth, including good reasons like academic maturity and not ready and a lack of readiness. So we can't have just one policy. Each student's family has to work with the school and to make sure and to collaborate and build consensus on what is right for the student. I think what you will always see come out of our school district in academic services, in these practices, in our responses to the pandemic, is really trying to put the student at the center of every decision and making the best decisions. And so, with keeping in mind that we've got 33,000 students. And so really trying to thread the needle on policy practices that we can live with.
Well, I heard my colleagues, it seems like all 4 of them would be inclined to support the proposal from the superintendent that's been vetted with the principals. I just am concerned about an unintended consequence of messaging, especially for our teachers who've worked really, really hard to get their students to engage, and that, now they'll figure, well, never mind. I just would ask you, Mr. Superintendent, and Jillian and your folks, to just think about ways that we could incentivize maintaining engagement at the level that they've achieved thus far. If it isn't the pass-fail or the threat of a grade that has seemed so problematic in the face of a trauma, then maybe there's some other way, some other extra credit that brings up, maybe their 3-week average is on the cusp. I mean, their 3/4 average is on the cusp, and maybe they could get extra points to bring it up to the next, I don't know, something. Just, I would ask that you please consider, because I'm really concerned about the unintended consequences of trying to address what is likely the need of many, many families, but certainly not all. And, Mr. Superintendent, you've said it yourself about what you would do as a student if this were.
Well, and to your point, and right now we're going to need to kind of speed things up. I mean, we haven't seen each other in a while. We're probably on track for midnight right now. But to your point, and that's cool. I mean, really, it's good. That's good, right? We're all at home. Well, some of us are at home already, so it's no big deal. Just walk to the other bedroom and get in bed. But to Mr. Rasmussen's point, what I've learned is with 5 board members, there's, I don't know if the word conservative and liberal are the right words, but some of you are lean right, lean left, and some are more in the middle. And I'm trying to balance that act. We're a month out from the end of school, and to your point, Mr. Rasmussen, I had the same concern you did. I mean, when I was in school, the teacher didn't announce, and I use this word curve, basically what we're doing with this average of the 3 9-week grades to replace the 4th 9 weeks if the kid was was not, did not perform as well or had other issues. We're announcing that a month ahead of time. I never had a teacher tell me a month before the exam what the fallback plan or the curve was. It was usually after the exam.
After the exam.
And so I had a 60, and I'm like, oh my God, I made a 60. I tried my best and I made a 60, but he curved it 25 points, so I got an 85. And we're doing, because I'm waving the white flag. I know this isn't a white flag, but I'm waving the white flag, and we're going ahead and making this announcement tonight. And our principals had rather wait another week, 2 weeks, or longer to keep that engagement, to keep kids not knowing what the curve or the fallback plan was, right? The safety net was, in fear of the Rockies of the world. We're going to take advantage of the safety net as soon as he realized what the safety net was. Now, we have a number of our kids, like my brother and sister, that were SUMA graduates. They're much more driven. They're going for the A. It doesn't no net. They're striving for that A unless they potentially already had 3 A's for the first 3 9 weeks. So I've wrestled with this decision. Our principals have wrestled with it. I apologize to our teachers. I have a lot of teachers who are very upset at me right now. But all in all, I think given the totality of the circumstances, at the end of the day, we would have gotten here. Quite honestly, I would have rather gotten here 3 weeks from now as opposed to tonight, but it is what it is. So with that, I think, Jillian, you need to start diving into, unless there's something else a board member wants to ask.
Well, I'm just concerned that I don't think our board policy on grades 5421 anticipates just no grade at the end. But I'll leave that to you to vet and figure out, and we'll move on for the sake of time.
Ms. Rasmussen, I take your point. I'll check on that, and I'll make sure that we're in compliance with 5421. And I think that Mr. Jones, to answer your question, one of your questions had to do with the engagement level of the principals. And so just for the purposes of grading, what we did is we had what's called a working group where we identify Title I, non-Title I, elementary, middle, and high school principals, and to sit on this working group and vet all these different ideas before we brought it forward to the larger principal groups, elementary, middle, and high, separately. And so we had 3 Title I schools, 2 non-Title I schools at the elementary level, 1 Title I school, 2 non-Title I schools at the middle school level, and then 1 each at the high school level. And certainly in my notes, I'll just share with you that, I mean, I can tell you, but for the sake of time, I'll share the schools and we can go from there. But I do want to let you know that the principal work group was involved. They gave me tasks to do, to go research things and find out what was able to be done. And then, and that I reported back, and then they were the ones who made the decision on the preferred model. And then to the superintendent's point, the feedback or the concerns that we got was not necessarily about the model or the safety net, it was about the timing. And so again, I think we're just again trying to make sure that we thread a needle and we communicate, and it doesn't look like we're waiting till the last minute. With that, we are working really diligently.
Well, part of the reason why I asked the question that I did, ma'am, was in yesterday's agenda review, I brought up the discussion as one of my concerns about the whole notion of site-based leadership. And particularly in lieu of the pandemic, and God knows we have done a noble and yeoman's job, I am concerned about how parents across our community are communicating different levels of engagement in the classroom with their schools and with their principals. I understand that my district is unique to me in that all of my schools are town schools that are found in my district, right? And my 5 elementary schools, parents are talking about different types of engagement and experiences with their teachers. And so that's why I asked about the whole notion of the guidance that comes from the district and the involvement of all principals talking in tandem, such that is there some uniformity. Now, what I do take great comfort in is, and that is your initial explanation when it came to the issue of students being retained and the grades that are provided, to know that a student will not be retained just off of what could have been an arduous, the arduousness of being engaged in this type of context with paper-based instruction compared to those who may have been involved in online instruction, and all of that occurring all in the context of one single location, right? One single school, and then varied schools within the same neighborhoods, right? And that are contingent to one another. So I feel relieved to know that there has been that type of conversation, and that type of conversation when we move forward, and I know you'll be talking about that later on. I want to make certain that we engage our Title I Citizen Advisory Committee, right, or our Title I Advisory Committee, and what we do, the TAC committee, the DAC committee, right? That was one of the things I also brought up yesterday, because I think their engagement going forward will help to inform our long-term protocols and paradigms for providing instruction in our district. They are an enormous resource of insight and information and perspective, because they represent so many various constituencies found in our school district. But thank you for your explanation. For me, I feel satisfied. Thank you, Ms. Gregory.
Yes, sir. So that brings us to the second, some of the second questions I believe were asked at the agenda review, and that are part of part of my presentation tonight, which has to do with the pandemic response in general. And so Mr. Jones's comments set up the next part of this update perfectly. So essentially, you know, I'm considering what we are living right now collectively as pandemic 1.0, and where we are is where we are, right? And so we've received plenty of feedback on the variety and volume of instructional platforms, the variation in educational experiences by school, the lack of consistency in academic and educational expenses within the district, expectations within the district, and of course the digital divide, which we've addressed earlier this evening. And so what we are working on doing is, and as you may be aware, I believe the superintendent announced and put together a survey that was published beginning last evening, soliciting input from our stakeholders. In addition, we are working on developing some focus groups with DAC, which is our District Advisory Council, which is made up of parent, teacher, and community stakeholder leaders, as well as a Title I Advisory Council, which is made up of the same kind of model, but with parents who are involved in the Title I schools, to provide focus groups and feedback on what went well in the pandemic 1.0 response, but more importantly, what do we need to do differently? How can we organize our work? You know, I'm not a prognostician, but I do believe that, you know, the news, when they say that it's reasonable for us to anticipate something else coming sometime potentially in the 2021 school year. So while we're in the middle of closing out what I call pandemic 1.0 and collecting, we are going to begin to collect feedback from teacher groups, from parent groups, from community stakeholders to drive and inform how we respond for 2021 in the event that we have another shuttering of schools because of a pandemic. And so right now we are beginning the when I say very beginning stages of that. Tomorrow, there's just a couple of folks. We're going to start trying to organize some of this. And when I say folks, I mean staff, to kind of get a handle on what is the scope of this work? What are some of our options? We've received the feedback on all of these different pieces and parts that I've already mentioned. How can we refine all of this so that should we have a pandemic 2.0, we have the ability to respond in a way that reflects what our community has provided us in terms of feedback. And our community includes everyone. It includes business partners, it includes teachers, it includes administrators, everyone, because we're all in this together. But really, and the superintendent referenced this way earlier in the meeting, one of the things we probably also need to work on together, the school board members and the superintendent, and is a long-term vision. And I think this gets to Ms. Striplin's point of what is it that we can do to, in a meaningful way, address shuttering schools, right? So we may or may not have a pandemic next year, but what does it, but for the grace of God, 70 miles west of us, Bay County experienced Hurricane Michael. What can we do that with these lessons learned, understanding that how the digital divide is amplified in situations like distance learning, how discrepancies in instruction, discrepancies in the work expected of students. It's all amplified when we're in the middle of a crisis. So there's a 3.0 that we need to get to, right? And so it's the idea that we're in this 1.0, we're going to get through it. We've got these things, we've got to collect information, we've got to get our focus groups, we've got to hear from the community, in all of our community, and then inform our work for 2.0, have something ready to go, cleaned up for August. And then what does it look like really long term, where we're really allocating financial resources and a sustainable model of, and certainly it's the leadership, it's under the school board and the superintendent. If the desire is to go one-to-one, what does that look like? How is it sustainably financially supported? What does it look like in terms of tech support? What does it look like in terms of expectations, not only for students, but for teachers? What does it look like in terms of collective bargaining? All of those kinds of things. And so that is that's the third phase of this, which is what I refer to in my mind, because I'm concrete sequential, as 3.0.
Appreciate your looking ahead, thinking ahead, planning. I think we all agree that we've done,
You're muted.
there we go. Sorry, juggling earphones. I think we've done fairly well, or as well as could be expected under the current circumstances, but I think the expectations would be different come August. So thank you for that. Anybody ready to move on? Everybody? Ms. Wood?
Thank you, Jillian.
Just quickly, yes, thank you, of course. And I'm a little bit curious to see how we're going to solicit feedback. Are we going to do a climate survey this year? Are we going to go by, individual school and get feedback from our parents on how this went for them in an organized way. So that's one question. And the other one is to involve our business community and so forth. And some of these issues, particularly the digital divide and county commission, city commission. So I would really like to see, as you get these areas divided, that we have board representation. If there's 5 committees, that each of us could participate on that and then report back to the board. So that's just my request, that as we move forward in the planning, that somehow the board can be more involved. Anyway, I'd like to be more involved. Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Well, that goes back to Mr. Superintendent, the committees that Ms. Jillian described, are those representative of the ones that I described yesterday as a part of my concerns? That blue ribbon task force that we talked about? Is that what she showed? Is that what she's describing as pandemic 3.0?
Yes, it is. There's a part of it. Now she's divided it into sections. So one group would work on getting us ready for August. One group would work on, and then beyond August, pandemic 3.0, where do we go? What are we looking at as far as one-to-one and one-on-one options and those types of things? So yeah, they would be divided into different groups, and each group would have their specific tasks of coming up with whatever that group was overseeing. Is that right, Jillian, or you?
Yeah, so I think to both Ms. Wood and Mr. Jones's comments or questions or concerns. So the idea is that really in accordance with School Board Policy 9410, we would be staffing up and maintaining a multi-departmental, district-led, community supported committee that would help us suss out what does our long-term strategic response to these kinds of events look like, what are the and then really kind of giving us the vision, and then which would include, of course, school board member representation. I mean, off the top of my head, I could just think of, we would need to have a large steering committee and then a group who are tasked with social and support services in and around nutrition and those kinds of areas. Then we've got issues in and around technology. That's another group in and around academics, in and around instructional practice, mental health services. So that, I think, for pandemic 1.0, I know this may be inelegant, but we were maybe building a little bit of the plane as we were flying it. And the idea, and I think, I'm just a staff, like the work of my colleagues is awe-inspiring, and it makes me want to get up every day and do a better job. I mean, the work that TIS has done in food services, 144,000 meals. I mean, that's amazing. And so when we talk about these kinds of events, we're really talking about how we can leverage all of these resources under one umbrella. That really is that's the 3.0, which we're talking about, which is going to need community. We're going to need TMH, Department of Health. We're going to need you and your representatives to really help us work together to understand a long-term strategic plan for an event like this.
I'm sorry. Continue, Jillian. Forgive me.
No, I'm done. I'm good.
Well, my point was going back to what I discussed just yesterday, and Ms. Wood now recants today, is that I think it's important that I know this right here is just a template and an outline that you've given us today. When you formalize it more fully, then you can inform us, even the superintendent, what would be the level of engagement in terms of appointments that we would provide. One of the stakeholder groups that I talked about most specifically yesterday were the business community and the health community. But based upon your being subject matter experts, the fullness of expertise and perspectives that will help to inform us moving forward. And we realize that it is our school district and our assistant superintendents and directors who are the subject matter experts, but that community buy-in we have seen is very important, whether it is the community partnership schools, whether it is this children's campaign that we're looking at. It is that type of community buy-in that has the type of sustainable long-term support that helps to make these brand new paradigms work, because everybody's invested in its success. And we know that our community is genuinely informed and invested in the success of our children. I think we just need to harness that human capital as we talk about reimagining our school district.
Indeed.
So I look forward to what you bring back to us and how we'll be engaged and be able to make subsequent appointments based upon our own cachet of representation.
Yes,
Thank
and I think, oh, I'm sorry. And I think I referenced the wrong school board policy, so forgive me if I did so.
Well, and let's be clear too, time is of the essence when it comes to planning for August or, or September, wherever we end up. And right now, it's just the fear of the unknown. Kim's going to talk the fear of the unknown with the budget, the fear of the unknown if we're going to be back in school in August or September. But we have to prepare like we're not going to be back. But hopefully we are. But we have to prepare and analyze what went well, what didn't go so well. How do we adjust? We know pandemic 3.0 is not going to happen in August. We have to do. We've been given grace.
Right now.
We have to do a better job of preparing for August or September if kids don't return.
I have one more observation, Jillian. In Pandemic 1.0, you make reference to the TAC and the DAC membership. We have since organized, I believe it's a early learning.
Yes, the pre-K committee.
And then there's also one to deal with persons with
disability parent.
The disability parent group. Yes. I think all of those different constituencies need to be represented in the focus groups subsequently moving forward, because all of those student populations have special considerations that we need, considerations that need to be taken into account as we plan for our brand new school system.
Yes, sir. Duly noted, and I apologize for excluding them. They are very important partners with us.
Yeah, we're starting to collect quite a few acronyms.
All right, are we ready to move on? Okay, Mr. Superintendent.
All right, Miss Banks, you're up, and then right after Kim, Deanna McAllister will kind of jump on to talk about personnel issues. So, and Kim, just dive a little bit deeper than I did yesterday. Maybe we don't have really an idea of what we're facing, but just some of your thoughts along with the budget and your meetings you're conducting with department heads.
Right. So just to give everyone a frame of reference, I wanted to kind of go back to the recession that hit in 2007, and just to give you an idea of what we're anticipating. So in 2007, the legislature passed the budget in May. They had 2 special sessions during fiscal year 2007-08, and then another special session during fiscal year 2008-09, all aimed at reducing expenditures. And over the course of those 2 years, the district's FEFP was reduced by about $18 million. So we went from $238 million to $220 million. And that's about a 7.5% decrease in funding. And also during that time, we didn't receive any of the ARA funding. So no federal stimulus kicked in for the district until around 2009-10. What we're doing currently is in March, DOE provided guidance to the districts that there would be no current year reductions. What we've done to ensure that basically any unnecessary expenditures aren't happening in the current year, we've gone ahead and placed a restriction on all travel. We've implemented a P card freeze. Human Resources has implemented a hiring freeze. We've gone to a summer schedule for utilities. And we've also restricted end of the year grant spend to try to push forward as much as we can into the next year. On our capital outlay side for our sales tax collections normally run about 2 months in the rears. So the April distribution that we just received was actually for February collections. So we haven't actually seen the impact of COVID yet on our collections. For next fiscal year, as you all know, the budget has still not been sent to the governor. So once it does, that'll start the 15-day clock for vetoes. Before COVID, we actually knew that the increases that were included in the FRS bill passed by the legislature basically eliminated any new funding for the district because that FRS increase, just as a reminder, our contribution increased by about $3 million. In addition to that, we have a new charter school opening, as well as a charter school expanding this coming year, which as a worst case scenario could take possibly between 700 and 800 FTE from our schools, representing possibly another $5 to $5.5 million loss. During this time, we've also been watching the enrollment in Florida Virtual School, and we've also been trying to consider what the impact of the increased unemployment rate could mean for our family empowerment scholarship participation. So as we start building our budget for next year, we're trying to take all of that into account and running different scenarios. Until we have more data from the state, we're building projections and we're basing it on a 10% reduction in funding between COVID and the FTE loss. Currently, we're working through a list of different budget reduction options to be able to present. As a reminder, we have about a $10 million fund balance in the general fund, in addition to our $5 million emergency reserve. Some good news, unlike the recession in 2007, the federal government has actually already taken action. So the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act, that everyone has been talking about, included $30 billion for K-12 schools. Florida's portion of those funds is estimated to be over $700 million. And Florida DOE is already in conversations with US DOE over the allocation methodology. So we believe we'll have access to those funds for the next fiscal year. What we've been doing in addition, we've spoken to our principals about, spending and helping us all work together to make sure that, again, we are pushing as much money as possible into next year. We also started meeting with all of the district level directors, myself, Dina McAllister, the superintendent, talking about efficiencies that we could make and how we can ensure that we have as much funding as possible going into the next fiscal year.
Well done.
Try to be fast.
Very well done. I know it's difficult and but critically important information. So thank you, Kim. Please keep us posted with new data points.
Okay, it's Dina McAllister. Good evening, school board chair, Ms. Rasmussen, and board members. I'm going to follow up with Kim, tag teaming with her as it relates to the hiring freeze that began on March 18th, 2020, and we implemented this hiring freeze just as an opportunity to really look at the needs of our district cost centers and how we can possibly save monies by reallocating or reassigning duties to individuals at various cost centers who show a skill set that could take on additional duties. So as Kim shared with you all, we're going through the process of meeting with district cost centers to review the needs, who's retiring, who's leaving, who has requested transfers possibly, and just looking at the grand or the bigger picture to see how we can be more efficient in our leadership here at the district office. I also want to take just a moment to talk with you about the Employee Assistance Program, which is a phenomenal program offered to us through Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. And it's very important during this time because it's unprecedented. We are experiencing what I refer to many people and that I speak with on the phone or here at work as our new normal. And although it is supposed to be normal, this is very unnormal or not normal for many of us. And so with that being said, our lives have changed, and we know that the dynamics of our households have changed for all of our Leon County School family and friends. So what we've done is we've reached out via email to make sure that our employees understand they have an opportunity, that if they're feeling overwhelmed and they can't find a sense of balance, that they can reach out and schedule a virtual meeting or a telemeeting, if you will, with the EAP program, which is the Employee Assistance Program. Each of our employees has an opportunity to attend the Employee Assistance Program or participate in it, and they have up to 4 free visits. So we're strongly encouraging that. And we got great feedback from teachers who were feeling overwhelmed, other district employees who felt like, golly, somebody who can listen to me, who's not going to judge me. Because as Jillian stated, as Kim stated, this is not normal and our employees are struggling. So we wanted to make sure they have that opportunity to do that. So that's where we are. The number for the Employee Assistance Program is 431-5190. Again, 431-5190. 90, and this will be in my write-up that it's submitted to you all. Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Dina. Do you have questions of Kim, Dina, or Kim?
Thank you, Dina.
Mhm.
Mr. Superintendent? You want to move on? You want?
Yes. Dr. Cox, you're up.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope the light's better. There's a couple of updates I want to give you. One is our mental emotional health support that we have offered during the stay-at-home time. And then also talk to you about exceptional student education, since that's a large percentage of our students, to let you know what we've done there and some things that we face there. We were kind of fortunate because we got wind of this stay-at-home situation before spring break. And as soon as Taja Fitzgerald, who is our coordinator of mental health services, that's money that's allocated from the School Safety Act, and Kim Scott, who is our director of student services, school psychologists and social workers and guidance counselors. So those two folks and myself, we kind of powwowed, all got together and said, this is going to be an issue. And so we then reached immediately out to Disc Village. As a reminder to y'all, we contract with Disc Village. They put health and wellness specialists in all of our schools, and they have a curriculum called New Horizons to work with our students that have these kind of needs. Disc Village stepped up to the plate real quick. They already had their own video conferencing before we did. MS Teams is what we've been primarily using, and then district supported. They had their own video conferencing, and they immediately reached out to all of the students that they were serving, their client load, even before we went to the stay at home. So that was a big help, getting them involved. The next thing we did is we created, with the help of Chris Petley, a button on the Leon County School homepage, COVID-19. And that gave us a place to put contact information, hotline information. And we were able to do that, and it's still live and still being updated on a pretty regular basis. And then, so we had folks who were reaching out to our students that we knew about. We had a place that students could go, or parents could go, or the community could go to reach out for help and make an appointment with Disc Village or make an appointment with our school psychologist. But I had to message it out. And so I'm hoping that we did a pretty good job of that. I have spoken on Facebook many times to y'all, to our principals, everywhere I know, to say that we're still active in this area and still we have support. There's something a couple of numbers I want to tell you. This is kind of interesting. So how many students are active or participating during this past 5 weeks, 6 weeks? 265 participants right now with our Disc Village folks and our school psychologists. All right, we also wanted to make sure that they could, that there was a way, if any had any new cases, that they could access it through the hotline. And we have 59 new cases. So I know that mental health is on everybody's mind. It's on the nation's mind, because this is something out of the routine, something different. Some folks don't handle that well. But just want to let you know that in my conversation with Disc Village today, 59 new cases have come forward since this happened. A couple of things I want to mention to you. On that COVID-19 site that's on the Leon County School homepage there, we also put several professional development for our teachers and our staff, because we have a lot of them that we were giving things to do, paraprofessionals, other staff members. We've had 200 individuals log in and take courses, 200 individuals take courses in regards to this area of mental and emotional health. And just to mention a few, it's stuff like the Jason Foundation Suicide Prevention Program, Florida School Personnel Mental Health Awareness Training, the Sanford Inspired Building Teaching Practice and Developing Social Emotional Learning Capacity. Those are just to mention a few. So we also have that professional development going on out there as well. Kim Scott, she's our director of student services. That's our school psychologist and social worker. So I thought when we were going to do this, I felt like when we do this tonight that you may be interested to what they're doing. It's quite a bit. Our school psychologists are generally in the practice of doing our evaluations for our exceptional students, but they have also stepped up the plate big time. Let me read this to you. Our school psychologists, they're providing opportunities each week for parents to schedule times to speak with them about issues they or their child may be experiencing while trying to balance, and this gets at some of the things we've been talking about tonight, while trying to balance work, remote learning, social distancing, and more. Now, we've got 15 of these folks out there, okay, 15 of these school psychologists, and so this is what they've been doing. Most schools are using a confidential sign-up Genius option for parents, several hours a day, a few days a week, are blocked specifically for this service. The school psychologists are also providing skills training for students, many of which were occurring prior to spring break. So just like Disc Village, if our school psychologists were working with kids, students, they reached out to them as well. They make referrals for families to tap into community health, mental health resources. So they're continuing that. And they continue to connect regularly with students they were working with during the school year. And let's talk about our social workers. This is a group that's kind of unsung heroes, in my opinion. That we don't hear much about them. We had 7 of them for the longest time. We now have 10. They're connecting in various ways with families they had worked with prior to the break, just like everybody else. And often these are families with our highest needs. They're connecting with families regarding recent referrals to support mental health concerns. They're connecting with families experiencing food insecurity and other concerns. They make referrals for families to tap into community resources for food support and supplies. They were making many, many home visits. Now, we had to curtail that. We kind of brought that back under control, but they were only in the most dire circumstances do we still make those home visits, and we do it by appointment, and we figure a way to keep the distancing, of course. And they're providing opportunities for parents to speak with them about issues they or their child may be experiencing. So between our 10 social workers, our 15 school psychologists, just about a Disc Village person at every school, that's how we've reached out to the community. Now, we did send something out. We sent something out on March the 23rd, which was fairly early, and that's our suicide risk assessment virtual protocol. So we had to change that because we have a suicide risk assessment in the schools, but now everything's virtually. So we sent that out. I copied, last week I sent an update out to all the board members about these areas, and I included in that virtual protocol. It basically is very brief, and it tells a teacher, a paraprofessional, a therapist, anybody that hears a child talk about hurting himself or somebody else, it tells them what to do. It's that simple. It has a hotline number on it as well. And we sent that on the 23rd. We also sent it out last week on the 24th. And we will continually send that out and continually try to message those kind of things. I'm fixing to go to the exceptional student education part. Are there any questions on the mental health and what we're doing? Mr. Jones.
Unmute Mr. Jones.
I'm sorry. I just think it's exceptional that during this pandemic that you're still able to engage and identify new students who require our services, particularly during this stressful time. I just think that's pretty impressive. And again, I'm just astounded by the genius found, grateful for the genius found in our district. 59 students, and I'm sure there are tons more. I think anything we can do to continue to keep them engaged in that way to mitigate this arduous time, I think is notable. So congratulations that you were able to still be engaged with the kids.
Yeah, and I want to tell you, we talked about that. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? I mean, we were excited that the process that we kind of put in place actually does work, as long as we know about the child. But at the same time, there's 59 students that needed services during this time. So it's kind of alarming, isn't it? But it is a different time for everybody. Any other questions on the
we're available to them?
Madam Chair? Hello?
Go ahead,
Madam-
Ms. Bowen. Go ahead, Ms. Bowen.
Yes, yes. Dr. Cox, to what extent, once these students are identified, have you been able to engage the parents in what was going on? You probably mentioned that I had a little technical difficulty here, but to the extent that they are aware, parents of our students, yes.
So I don't know if you heard my piece on about it, but so our school psychologist, our social worker, and our disc village folks, which is a large number of people, were charged early with picking up the phone and contacting the students and the parents with them. Now, when possible, they'll do an MS Teams, which is, I don't know if y'all been, it's very similar to this Zoom, okay? So when possible, they'll do this kind of thing. Some of them use the FaceTime that's on their phones. It's however they can, however it works for the student. But we've had, and I've got some numbers in a minute about our percentage of the contacts. It's pretty good, pretty interesting too.
Okay, I'll be interested in listening to that later. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on mental health before I move on? Okay, exceptional student education. This is a large group that we don't want to lose. These are our students that, for the most part, have an IEP, which means they have a disability. And it's almost 6,000 students, not when you pull the gifted out. So I've got some notes here. And I think the best thing to do is, this also was sent to y'all last week. So I just pulled out and added a couple little things to it. But on March the 23rd, all ESE program specialists for compliance and behavior were trained in how to conduct MS Teams. So Kathy Shields is our ESE director. She's just a workaholic. She has tremendous amount of energy. And she has 3 coordinators under her, one that handles our behavior folks, another one that handles our compliance, our program specialist, and another one that handles all of our therapists. And we meet 8 o'clock through MS Teams, which is video conferencing software, 3 days a week. And because we're kind of building this bike like everybody else, and we're starting to have some discussions on pandemic 2.0 and 2.0 and 3.0 as well. The first thing we did is we got that group together and we got them trained on MS Teams. They work directly with the exceptional student teachers in all of our schools. So the ESE teacher in the school is still responsible for the IEP meeting. That's still their responsibility, just like we would do on any other time, but now it's done virtually. But this group was the first one out of the gate that helped train those teachers and helped facilitate setting up those IEP meetings. As a reminder, an IEP, individual education plan, is a group of teachers. It's specified in board rule about who. It's usually a regular education teacher, administrator, referral coordinator, an ESE teacher, therapist. That's usually a parent. That's usually who makes this group up. They're the ones that help devise the IEP and design the direction of what's going to go on. So this group early on took that charge. Now, IEPs, there's a lot in them, and we cannot possibly do the full IEP in the current format we're in. The Department of Education, federal government, recognized that early. And so they came out with something called temporary distance learning plans. And that replaces the IEP. What that does is it allows the ESE teacher can now contact the parent and they'll agree on like a strategy, or maybe there's a behavior goal that they'd work in, or a reading goal or a math goal, and they can just work on that one goal. And that way we don't have to implement, because we cannot implement the full IEP in our current circumstances. And this is national. This is everywhere. So what we've been doing now is we've been developing these temporary distance learning plans with direct contact with the parent through the ESD teacher and with support of the district folks. Now, if an IEP anniversaries, which means the year is up and it's time to do another IEP, then they have the IEP meeting and they do it through MS Teams, through video conferencing. So I'm not meaning to throw all this information at you right now, but that is how we're doing it. We have not had any problems that I know of. Everything's going pretty good. Matter of fact, John Hunkier set up a hotline for all these different areas, and we got very few calls. And Kathy Shields and I have been on we FaceTime to Facebook Live, and is trying to message this out as much as we possibly can as well. See if a couple of things, a couple of notes I want to talk to you about as our therapist. Pretty proud of this group. So we have occupational therapists, physical therapists, assistive technology. We have vision therapists, deaf, hard of hearing, and a couple other ones I probably just left out. But let's look at our ESE program specialists. Those are the ones. There's one for every school. They have about 4 schools apiece. They meet at least weekly with the ESE teachers and administrators at their assigned school sites to support the use of MS Teams and IEP meetings and eligibility determinations. That's still going on. This group of folks, they reach out and respond to parent questions and concern about their child's IEP and services. They're available and they respond to teachers, administrators, related services, personnel, and parents, and they'll do it any way possible. If parents don't have if they have a connectivity problem and they need to be in the temporary distance learning plan decision or an IEP, they don't have to do it through MS Teams. Simply, if they can just find a phone. And we actually have done phone audio conferencing before all this happened. This group creates plans and they follow up with parents and teachers who do not have internet access. They've been very vigilant about those we haven't been able to get in contact with. They provide support service to ESE and general education teachers, and they provide input into those temporary distant learning plans. Now that's the ESE program specialist. How about our physical therapist? Right now we have 99% contact with our the students that they had before the stay at home. 99%, I thought that was pretty good. They work to ensure all students are seen as requested by parents, keeping documentation as normal as well as brief documentation through focus. They attend all the IEP team meetings as well. How about our vision teacher? Vision teachers, they have 100%. They have got all the vision students in our district have been contacted and worked with. A couple things they do is Braille instructional packets completed and mailed to students. Service is implemented from parent request phone calls to televideo conferencing as well. Teachers of hard of hearing, deaf or hard of hearing, as y'all know, we were the center school district for 5 surrounding counties. 100% contact on that group as well. Assistive technology, 98% contact with that group. They troubleshoot any issues with assistive technology, devices, services that arise, they work with that. And adaptive physical education, we have one adaptive physical education. She's reached out to our regular physical education teachers that have students with special needs as well. All right, one more thing. ESY. Now that's extended school year. That is a requirement. It's a federal requirement. We will have ESY. It will start, and usually starts after about a week after post-planning. And we are probably going to go virtually. The reason why I'm just saying probably is because when the first thing we were told is that we were in the stay at home through the end of April. And at that point I said, we will pull the trigger on who can come back and who can't come back in May. And then of course the governor came back and he's put a stay at home or schools closed until the end of May. So actually this Friday is when the ESE team and myself will get together. Let me just read this about ESY. This is from Kathy Shields. I just want to be real clear on this. It stands for Extended School Year. It's an extension of special education related services that are provided to students beyond the normal school year. ESY is part of the Individual with Disabilities Education Act federal law, guided by state board rule. IEP teams make this decision. So they make the decision who gets to go. And it's basically for those students who are kind of they're regressing during the course of the year. So really, if they set out a summer, it really would be a problem. Or they're at a breakthrough. They've got a skill that they're on the edge of really breaking through. The IEP teams make this decision. In the past, it's been about 400 students. That's a lot of stuff. That's an update from social, emotional, mental health, and exceptional student education.
Thank you, Dr. Cox.
Yeah.
Questions? All right, thank you. We appreciate your time. Mr. Superintendent?
Great job, Alan. All right, Chief Hunkyard, you want to give a brief update on FEMA and the Integrity Group?
Yes, sir. Madam Chair, Superintendent, board members, I'd like to provide a brief update related to federal emergency reimbursement assistance for declared emergencies. Unfortunately, our district has experience with that in the past, generally in the form of hurricanes, damage assessment, operating shelters, tracking employee-related costs during closures. We recognized early on that this is an event that has a prolonged time period. From what I understand through experts, the tracking period began in mid-January. Obviously, most of our costs at this point are not related to property damage, but to food distribution, transportation of food products, key critical staff performing essential functions, managing a lot of distance learning and technology costs. A lot of the areas that are available for reimbursement are not only response to the COVID-19 emergency, but also the recovery and then planning and mitigation should there be future events. I think yesterday in the agenda review, I heard Mr. Jones mention the ability to take advantage of all funding opportunities for planning and items that we can learn from this. Superintendent mentioned the Integrity Group. The Integrity Group is made up of emergency management professionals. They also assist us with our management of our detail in providing elementary school safety officers to meet the requirements of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act. They represent a number of districts across the Big Bend. They're also engaged with Tallahassee Memorial Hospital related to FEMA reimbursement. FEMA reimbursements for emergencies are usually refunded at a 75% rate. As an example of engaging experts, that we have learned that by tracking our volunteer hours, the 25% match that the district would be accounted for, some of that can be made up with the value of volunteer hours. So all the great work that Dr. Gale and our volunteer office has done will help us as we move forward. We don't know how long this will last, but we know that we want to be first in the line of potential reimbursements. So we just wanted to brief the board to let you know that we do have an eye on FEMA reimbursements, and we have a team working on that. Ms. Banks is a big part of that, as well as Ms. McAllister in my office. Other brief safety and security events, obviously the talk yesterday and ongoing about school graduations. I can assure you that our team will work with student activities, our high school principals, the Civic Center, local law enforcement to make sure that we abide by the CDC guidelines and provide a good experience, a safe experience. And I have received feedback both through some informal direct conversations with you folks. I can tell you that the superintendent is heavily involved in this, our leadership team. As Dr. Cock mentioned, we've been in a support role. Generally, we are in the front of emergency emergency situations we've had in the past. This one is much different for us. We are operating our security center 24 hours a day. We receive a multitude of calls on many different aspects as we have all of our students and our families at home. But that is pretty much all I want to brief you on this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunkyar. I know you and I have spoken frequently about school security. I'm very pleased to see that we're trying to get in the front of the line for FEMA. I think for states who've never had the opportunity to work with FEMA, we will be at a great advantage because of the expertise of the contractors that we've are working with. And so thank you for your leadership as always. And would you just briefly mention, and maybe this is premature, forgive me if it is, but we talked about maybe the possibility of some other federal reimbursement money that could potentially become available for us to purchase devices for connectivity. And I'm just thinking about Ms. Strickland had mentioned that the possibility that we might need to bond. I I want to make sure that we're looking at every other opportunity before we go down that road. And I think you mentioned that that might be a possibility. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Through housing and urban development, what they call a mitigation grant, monies that were earmarked for the Big Bend area. It's my understanding that as early as the fall, September, October, they'll be requesting to receive projects related to that. So the superintendent and our group was briefed on that, and there is a potential for that. So I will hopefully bring forward more specific information about how, forbid if we ever have to be in this stance again, that we can be better prepared.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Bowen.
Yeah, Ms. Talkiar, are you at this time able to disclose, if it's appropriate, the amount of those dollars in a guesstimate, or it's too early to say?
Well, it wasn't a small amount. It was in the hundreds of millions for this area, and obviously after Hurricane Michael, there's some areas that have greater needs in different areas. But with the number of counties that the money could be made available to, it's our understanding that we would have a good chance to put forward a project that could be funded.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
We've always admired Mr. Hunker's grant writing skills. So we appreciate that. And later on the consent agenda, just while we've got Mr. Hunker here, we have, I think, the school resource deputies. Is that on? I think it's on consent, right? School resource deputy contract, and the 600 and some odd $1,000 of a grant from the Florida Department of Education for the school hardening. So as you know, this has been the top priority for me for school security. And I think we have a unique window here, just like with the construction, where we have schools that are empty right now, and a unique opportunity to try to get ahead of that and use this time wisely to continue our school security initiatives. So thank you, Mr. Hunker. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Right, and to your point, even today, they were at Leon High School installing mass notification systems at all of our large high schools where they can broadcast campus-wide during emergency situations, whether that be an active shooter crisis or severe weather. But so yeah, those projects are ongoing under Chief Hunkyard's leadership, and we've negotiated, John and I let the heavy go in. The heavy, our new CFO went across the street, negotiated our deal with the Sheriff's Department. We got a really good deal, and thankful for the sheriff and these negotiations. So we're going to save some money this year on school security. Not that we're cutting any corners, but but Kim just negotiated a really good contract for us. So we're excited about that. So now, Dr. Rogers, if you would give a brief update on homeless and foster, how you're ongoing to track those students. It was also mentioned by maybe Board Member Jones, if we're tracking kids who are not in school. I was at a convenience store the other day, coming out of a convenience store, and a lady screamed at me, "When are you going to tell that man to stop harassing me?" And I'm like, I'm sorry, man, what are you talking about? "No, you need to tell him to stop harassing me." And I was like, "What about? There's a reason my child hadn't been in school for 30 days, and y'all just don't, y'all just need to stop harassing." So I can assure you that the people in her department are trying to track down where these kids are, why they're not in school. So hats off to you, Dr. Rogers, and your team.
Good evening, everyone. As Superintendent mentioned, I'm going to focus on homeless and our foster kids. Weekly, we are meeting or having conference calls on what we call ESSA calls. There are best interest determination meetings in light of our foster care students who are coming into our district as well as who's leaving. And what we've seen as well as the trend is that with us being so close to the end of the school year and many of our students leaving our district for one reason or the other, the caregivers are requesting that they stay connected with their school of origin. and the principals have been gracious. They have worked with us to make sure that they keep this to school, and with distance learning, it makes it very easy for them to continue with their education. So we have been able to do that with our foster care students. The other group that we want to mention, I think often of this commercial that is being played quite regularly, and that is, we talk about being sheltered and washing our hands. But what about the homeless who don't have a shelter and who do not have running water to wash their hands? And these kids are particular. We have about we are reaching out to our homeless children. We want connected with their teacher to have some kind of device as well as connectivity so that they can work on whatever assignments that they are giving. At our Hope Center, we have established a lab where we rotate the students. We have 11 at a time, and they're rotated through the lab in the lab throughout the day so that they can get their assignments and work with them. For those who are ESE students, we have connected them with Kathy Shields' shop and their ESE teachers who connect with them to make sure that they get the support they need. So there's regular communication with our liaison there, Ivory Miller, as well as and their parents to make sure that the students are staying on track and getting what they need. I think one of the board members mentioned truancy officers. I think it's Mrs. Bowen earlier in terms of what is going on with truancy officers. Are we connecting with them? Well, as you can see, we have a pretty high success rate with connecting with all of our students. But when the principals cannot reach a student or a parent, then they reach out to us. And as early as just earlier this week, we were able to send staff out to connect with families. As you know, with the loss of jobs, we are going to see an increase in a number of homeless families within our district. And right now we're seeing evidence of that, where some families are not, we're unable to connect with them with what contact information we have. So currently we are reaching out to those parents, we're getting updated information, and right away we're connecting them with their principals again. So that strategy is working out pretty well. And I think that's pretty much it. We are continuing. Yeah, some of our gems are still getting in trouble in the community. So we have Mr. Bruton, who continues to connect through Zoom with the courts on a regular basis, but we are keeping up with those things as well. But our two main focus right now are our foster kids as well as our homeless kids.
Very informative and sad reality for us. And I appreciate you, Dr. Rogers. For those of you who are listening in, she calls our children gems like GEM, not JIM. So we appreciate you. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? All right, Mr. Superintendent.
All right. And then Dr. Gale, a brief update on the survey we released today. And then I'm going to ask you to help me take notes as we finish up with the board members' concerns or issues or things they want to raise about our plans for graduation ceremony. So Dr. Gale, if you would give an update on the survey and any community partnerships.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, and Superintendent Hannah. My briefing will be quite brief. So one of the things that I wanted to just give a little bit more information on was our community partnerships. From the very start of everything that we've been dealing with COVID-19, we have engaged our community so much so that first week after the extended spring break, when we were offering meals at our selected school sites, which have grown exponentially, we had volunteers from our community come. I'd like to give a shout out to Kelly Walker and Jillian Jones, because they worked really hard behind the scenes to vet our volunteers, because they were going onto a school campus. We did this for about a week, and the thousands of hours that our community put into making sure, working alongside the superintendent, nutrition services, our school leaders, and our school nutrition service workers to make sure that our students were getting fed was just, it warms your heart. We continue down that track. I won't go over what Mr. Howcroft has already done, but we've had a chance to really embrace some partnerships with Second Harvest of the Big Bend. Shout out to Monique and her entire team, because as of today, and we had a Second Harvest event at Sealy Elementary School today from 10 o'clock until 12 o'clock, where we fed over 500 families. Mr. Superintendent and I, he often comes by, he rolls up his sleeves and he gets right to work. The lines are getting longer when we're feeding our community. And these feedings are anybody in the community. We do have to fill out federal forms, but they are getting longer. This was our largest Second Harvest feeding. We have another one coming up at Amos P. Godby High School. Another partner that we have engaged with is Farm Share. We've had 2 Farm Share events, but we're working on trying to get those a little bit more organized before we go forward. Our superintendent is leading us in that venture. As of this date, we have distributed over 71 tons of food to our community. We have impacted close to 4,000 families during these 9 feedings and even more. And so that continues, and we're thankful for those partnerships that is putting food on the table for all of our families. As our superintendent said, before I go on, do you have any questions about that? Thank you. The superintendent said we just launched a survey. It was launched last night, April 27th. It will be active through May the 1st. And School Board Member Wood, it is not a climate survey, but it is more of a temperature check. Parents are asked to identify the schools that their students attend, and then they're asked 2 open-ended questions in regards to our distance learning. What's going well? And then in regards to our distance learning, what would you like to see changed? At the end of the week, we'll get that information. We'll start coding it so that we can learn, as Ms. Gregory says, and we can continue to build upon the programs that we have in place. So it's not a climate survey, but it's, I'll use Dr. Rogers' terms, it's more of a temperature check to see how things are going and what's going well and what we can learn from.
Thank you, Dr. Gale. Do y'all have questions of Dr. Gale, Madam Chair?
Chair. Ms. Strickland.
No questions, just a great appreciation to Dr. Gale for all she's done for the district, for the students, for our community the last month. She's everywhere you go, feeding, taking care of people. So just no one can ever say thank you enough to Dr. Gale for what she's done the last few weeks.
Enormous. It has been enormously impactful, and and the number of students, I've been present with them at a number of these, her and the superintendent across the width and expanse of our district. It has been extremely impactful and very, very meaningful. And I just applaud our school district and our leadership. Thank you.
Ditto, ditto, ditto.
And I think an open-ended survey at this point is a really great idea. 2 questions, that sounds like a perfect survey for me to really figure out what's going on.
We're going to be enlisted to help read them if they're.
Yeah, great job, great job.
Grading an exam. All right.
All right, and then finally, last but certainly not least, graduation plans. I've been thinking long and hard about this issue for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Once I realized that our kids have already been robbed of a prom, of a senior trip that they have been looking forward to, and was there any way for us to salvage some type of graduation ceremony? I've had conversations with each of you individually, listened to some of your concerns, which are very valid. I felt like it was important for us to give kids more than just what we are doing now with 500 graduates at one time, not just us doing some type of Zoom graduation, that we gave them something a little more tangible, a little more of substance. I ran the drive-in ceremony past the folks in the community, in the healthcare community, the Department of Health, Tallahassee Memorial, Capital Regional, talked to the sheriff. There were some tweaks that they wanted to make with some of the things that were being discussed. At the end of the day, once they were settled, I went to the kids to talk to the kids and got their feedback. I know a lot of other districts are kicking the can down the road and saying, well, maybe something will change in June or maybe something will change in July. And, you know, realistically, we're not going to go from this to June putting 5,000 people in the Civic Center. We're just not. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. That the last phase of anything is going to be mass gatherings, even if you try to put a number of people in Doak Campbell Stadium and spread them out all over the stadium. So I felt like this idea was making the best out of a very challenging situation, but still bringing all of those young people together at one spot, the Leon County Civic Center. Just their graduation ceremony won't be like it was for Ms. Striplin and I inside the Civic Center. It would be in the parking lot of the Civic Center. The kids, although still, you know, wanting something, maybe the potential for something more, this I thought was important to be done during that graduation week before a lot of our kids are going off into the military or going into whatever step next is, and they're going to be gone in June, July, or August. I do have commitments, however, from all of our high school principals that if restrictions do subside some and the social distancing guidelines are loosened, that every school principal would then welcome some other type of second round of recognition over the course of the summer or early fall. And to a T, we want to give these kids what they deserve. You know, my daughter's a senior in high school. They're going to do some type of Zoom virtual. Actually, they're doing a drive-by graduation, which is just each kid drives by and I don't know if they throw something in the window or what exactly they do, but there really is no speeches. There's no personality to it. Does this come with issues? Yeah. Does it come with risk? Yeah. But I've worked with kids this age group my entire career, and I don't want to not do something to help them for fear that they will not act responsibly and they won't do the right thing. Are we taking a leap of faith with our kids? Yeah, in a way we are, but I have full faith and confidence that they're going to do the right thing, and we're going to make this a memorable event. And as things change now, between now and the end of May, we're still a month out. Restrictions may loosen where we can do, more than we have planned for now. But for now, given the guidelines by the health experts, we are abiding by those guidelines to devise this drive-in ceremony. But having said that, I want to get your feedback. I've heard some of your concerns, but I think now is the time that I can capture them. And we're meeting with the school principals and the senior sponsors next week at all 6 of those schools. And Dr. Gale is working with our smaller sites and special sites to make sure we have some type of ceremony for those students as well. But with that, Madam Chair, I'll open it up for any questions or comments.
Ms. Wood? Oh, okay. Hold on. I'm unmuted. I want to thank you, Superintendent, for being imaginative. If people know one thing about you is that you really care about kids and you want something special for them, and all of your ideas come straight from your heart. And we couldn't ask for a better superintendent to have that as his go-to place. But what's going to be fun for these kids? And I listened to the Facebook Live thing today, and I really felt the enthusiasm from your school leaders. And of course, you're going to have detractors, but it was clear looking at those students that they really appreciated you going this extra mile to do something special. Will it be perfect? No, but it's going to be okay. Some of the concerns I've raised that we've talked through, it's really just, again, it's kind of like the grading thing. What are the rules? Are they fair? And are they enforceable? And so I look forward to a plan from you that really tells us and the kids, and they sort of sign, I'd like to see them all sign on the dotted line, that they understand what the rules are, what's allowed, what's not allowed, what you can bring in your car, what you can't bring in your car, just all those things. and just what the security measures are going to be. So I'm going to leave that for a later time when you can get back to us on that. One thing I thought of while we were talking is, since you're going to have these cool smart buses now, maybe you can bring some of those into the parking lot. So if you are able to do any kind of a Zoom, anything in the parking lot, everybody will have Wi-Fi. So that's just an idea I'm throwing in. I hope you can make it lots of fun for them. I'm glad they can decorate their cars and have some personality to it with the school flavor. So I'm wishing us all the best on this.
Well, I appreciate that. And to your point, I think what we're going to do is the kids still have to go get their caps and gowns from their school sites by appointment, and that we're going to get that signature sheet that has all of that information, that they understand the expectations and the rules, and these are the consequences, as my wife would like to say, if you don't follow those rules. For each one will be signed off by the graduate and by their parent before they could pick up their cap and gown. So there's full expectation. You know, this is what we expect to happen during the ceremony.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Just a couple questions. One is, if this were me, I can just see my friends and I saying, "Mom and Dad, you guys watch from the air conditioning at home. We'll all pile in our family Suburban, and all my friends and I would go to graduation together." You mentioned on the Facebook Live thing today about one school in particular they're going first, and if they mess it up, what are the consequences for everybody else? Or if one school in line, I don't want us to see, we've had situations where kids have pulled stunts during regular graduation, and that hasn't stopped the graduation for the subsequent schools. I'm just putting this on your list of things to think about for future reference. Ms. Bowen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mrs. Superintendent, I just want to thank you for having this novel idea and for going this extra mile. And to personalize this just a bit, I remember how important it was for me to know that I had finally reached that 12th grade year and could walk across the stage and be proud and show my parents that we did it. And so you have found a way, I think, in this imperfect opportunity, I'm going to call it, to give, though it's not the perfect circumstances, but it still is an opportunity for everyone to have a chance to experience a graduation, which is a milestone for many of our students. And I appreciate that, and thank you for doing it. And certainly I know that you are keeping in mind the importance of the safety, because you mentioned that you would have security there, and you've gotten the blessings of the state and the city and the county and the hospital and all of those community entities. And it sounds like to me that the consensus of the board is this is about the best we're going to be able to do. And I think that the community and the students know that this is all beyond our control. COVID-D, if there was anything we could do about it, we would. We have no power to do anything about that. And so perhaps this is going to be the learning opportunity for all of us, and even our young students, because in life there are going to be some disappointments. And I don't mean to pour any water on this wonderful flame and the yearning to walk across that stage or to have this graduation. And for even some of us as adults, the world is changing, and we're thinking of new ways to deal with each other. And so it's my personal feeling and belief, based on the facts, that at this point, this is probably the best we can do. I look forward to this for the students. And as school board member chairwoman was saying, I hope that our students will continue to appreciate this as much as they have conveyed to us that they want this, so that every school can have an opportunity to engage in this this particular event. And most of them have no ideas what the old drive-in movie theaters used to look like. I suspect some of our school board members don't either. But in any event, yeah, I know. Isn't that something? It's an opportunity for them to know that we care about them. We've cared about them since day one, and we care about them even these days. And when they go off with their pictures on their phones and they can talk to others who going to be at their colleges or at their place of skill development, they can say, I'm from Leon County and this is what they did for us. And we really do appreciate that. And so I just want to thank you for not letting go of your idea and pushing it through. And I hope that we'll be able to feel the wonderful, the afterglow of this when it's all over. So thank you and staff. And if I had to vote for it right now, I'd vote yes. So, okay, there we are.
Hello. I have two questions. Well, I know we talked about the radio broadcast occurring simultaneously with the graduation ceremony. Is there an option for television, whether it be pay-per-view or public or our own channel that's made available to us that the graduations might be aired so that families can see them visually as well?
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
also,
Go ahead. What's your other question? I'll do them both.
and then also, I think it's very, very critical that if we want to ensure this, be able to mitigate what I know are all of our shared safety concerns about safety, that parents be held accountable and that there be, as you promote this to the public and to the graduates and to their families, that there's a certain level of accountability for failure to comply with whatever rules we will have set for this brand new paradigm of graduation. That it just can't be merely instructed, that there will be persons engaged who will be able to enforce what are our rules, and that those persons who do not follow our rules will subsequently suffer consequences, and that be communicated not just to a graduate, but to the families who will also be there. This is an event for parents as well. Parents can also be held accountable for the activities of their children on this final day, such that we can have complete compliance and that all persons who are engaged are safe and we don't put ourselves in some type of litigious situation.
Yeah, and to that sounds like a lot like Ms. Wood's point, that we're going to set those guidelines starting tomorrow, and then we'll work on getting that rules sheet out, get it to our graduates, then the graduates and their parents would sign off on it, the expectations, and these are the consequences, and then turn those back in the middle of May before they pick up their caps and gown.
Right. Information. I'm sorry, Ms. Superintendent, but yes, that information that you're talking about, I think would be important because there will be tag numbers there. I mean, we probably will go that far. Hunky Air will take care of that. I'm sorry.
But we also have a commitment from the sheriff of,
wonderful. Okay.
20 or more deputies that will be monitoring the parking lot. To your other point, Mr. Jones, these digital boards are very high tech. We had to get something that you could see clearly during broad daylight because we didn't want to do this event at night in the dark. So these also have live streaming capability both on Facebook and YouTube. So each board comes with a technician. They are sending actually 3 technicians that operate the boards and the cameras that we're putting up in a hotel for those 3 days that will be operating the live streaming and the cameras and all the things that are going on with these 2 boards that we're paying for. But it will be live streamed on Facebook and YouTube for those family members. You can only fit X number of family members in a vehicle. The rules are however many seat belts, that's how many behinds are in the car. That's by law. And if you have more behinds than you do seat belts, then you're going to be subject to a citation from the law enforcement officers that are going to welcome you to the parking lot. But for other family members, for elderly members, grandparents, or split families and others, that yes, the live streaming will happen through Facebook and YouTube. We're going to have drones up in the air capturing pictures of the parking lot and the event. We have flags ordered for each school that'll be flying on the flagpoles up on the pavilion area. We have banners, we have feathers. I mean, so we're going to make it as festive as we possibly can. I can assure you that.
By feathers, you mean feather signs, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, those things that blow in the wind that have, Child's High School or Sale High School or whatever on them, big banners that some companies, businesses that are going to sponsor some of these. And the other thing someone mentioned about cost, we usually pay between $60,000 and $70,000 a year to the Civic Center to rent the facility. There will be a fee associated with the parking lot. It won't be nearly as much as the building cost, but all in totality, this event will cost less than what we usually pay for the Civic Center each and every year.
Great. Ms. Strickland, did you have a question or comment?
I did. I have several, so bear with me for just a few minutes. So let me back up to just a minute to what you just said about that we'll have YouTube and broadcast capabilities for split families. Are you saying that if we have divorced families, you're maintaining only one car can go in?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have room, but we have 470 students in Childs, Lincoln, and Leon at those schools, and there's just not enough room for more than one car per student. It would be almost impossible to control.
Okay, so I am then completely against this plan. I come from one of those families, and to imagine that a child is going to have to look at their parents and say, you can go to my graduation, but you cannot unless you can ride in the same car together. And we can't judge our families over why they can't ride in the same car together. We don't know their situations. We don't know their households. But to put a child in that situation is completely unacceptable. I like the plan. Other than that, I think our community is appreciative for the gesture. And I watched the stream today too and saw all the comments, and you're never going to make everybody happy. But the one that really jumped out to me was that we had not factored in our split families, and we're putting a child that's already had some trauma in their life, we're putting them in a really, really difficult situation. And, and I feel bad. There were grandparents that said, what about the grandparents? And I feel bad for them, but we're doing the best, we're doing the best we can. But if we can't accommodate both mom and dad being there, this is not a plan I can support.
That's fair. I completely understand that. My response would be, I would expect the adults to be adults, and if they can't get along and get in the same car to support their biological child, then so be it. I mean, we just don't have the means and the wherewithal to support more than one vehicle. I would just ask that the parents suck it up and get in the car together on behalf of their child and not put their child in that situation.
So you're going to ask a spouse that was possibly abused by a spouse at one time. You're going to ask them to get in the same car.
I'm not saying
all
that.
The trauma, and I'm just saying we don't know our families. We've talked about this about every student that exists in our school. We have no idea what goes on, in their home life, the trauma that comes with them. And the difficulty that maybe they've struggled through, and we try to accommodate those education needs for every student because they're all different. And this is something that we have no way of knowing, and we have no right to place judgment on that family. And there may be really extenuating circumstances. So we're placing that child in just a really difficult situation when it's already difficult. Other than that, I am I have questions and concerns. I think the dates, if we know the dates, they should be released immediately. The communication should be there, but that's a deal breaker for me.
Okay. Well, I just don't see a way around it. You have kids that are bounced back and forth between split families. They're with one parent one week and another parent the other week. And I would just ask, in this situation, I'm not going to the extreme of there was abuse in the home or someone was, I just can't answer all those questions, but we don't have the means unless you have a better idea. I don't have a plan to monitor and to control more than one vehicle per graduate.
Well, I would say that together we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wonderful, compassionate, brilliant minds here. And while I may not have an immediate other plan, because I like your plan, I really do. you know, nothing is perfect right now. Nothing is gonna make everybody happy, and I absolutely agree with you on that. But we have a wonderful board, and you need to lean on us for our suggestions and for our ideas, because we have them. We know our constituents better than any. We know the communities that we represent. We know the neighborhoods that we live in, and we know our students and our families, just like you do. And lean on us for ideas and suggestions. But I can't support that one.
What if we,
Madam Chair?
Mr. Jones?
I think School Board Member Strickland's point is well made. I think that we need to find, I agree with the plan, but I think that either through documentation, particularly where there may be possibly, and we hadn't thought of this extreme, where there may be a restraining order that may exist in a family, right? And so where there may be documentation, particularly of abuse, whether it may be in most immediately or in the past, I think that those types of special considerations should be made. And I think that we can find a way to nuance it in such a way that we can communicate that to families, whereby some type of a stipulation can be made at that. I just don't think we can blow it off. And I think we need to, and through counsel, we have expertise found in our staff with Mr. Hunkier. We have legal counsel with Ms. Williams and others. And I think we can find a way to nuance that such that we're still able to continue with our plan and be able to meet what are the special and unique needs found in the diversity of families that comprise our Leon County School District.
What I was going to suggest along that line is, could we work with our guidance counselors and the people who know our students and their circumstances the best? And as an overall rule, it is it's one car per family. And I agree with you that most divorced parents can find a way to be the adults and get in the car and support their child. But for those extenuating circumstances where there's a restraining order, or the guidance counselor or teacher knows that it's really, really going to put the kid in a really tough bind. You know, if we have the largest class we have is 500, we have 600 spaces, roughly.
The largest classes are about 470, and in the confined, in total there's about 600 spaces there, but the areas that we're using,
For the state,
you don't have that much room. Look, we're still a month out. If we want to try to firefight it on a case by case, but that I just fear we're going to have every family's going to want to bring their extended family, and if we can find a way to accommodate those with those very, very, very extenuating circumstances, then I'm for it. And I don't want to put any child in a position where they're having to choose between a parent, which parent gets to come or which parent doesn't, because for whatever reason, the parents can't get in the car together. So if we can come up with an idea, and let me talk to the principals. Like I said, we still have a month out to firefight this issue. Then we're going to do it. I don't want that to be, although it's the deal breaker with Ms. Strickland, unless we can come up with something creative, which we still have time to do that. So,
Mr. Superintendent, just as we trust the students to behave, we can trust the students to be honest about their family situations.
Yeah. And Madam Chair?
Ms. Bowen?
Yeah, I certainly am willing to continue to give this some further thought. I do like the plan, but to continue to kind of brainstorm, because I see what more we might be able to do to assist in the efforts or the concerns that were raised.
And this may very well be a reason to let students come together if the restrictions are lifted by the end, and I just think a little more thought would.
When you say students come together, what do you mean?
Well, if mom and dad can't get along and a couple of friends want to drive together in their own car without parents to their own graduation. I mean, we have students who don't have parents that are involved in their lives.
Right.
This is true.
Right. So point back to, let's let the people
work it through. Yes.
I don't know, how do other schools that hand out tickets, how do they manage this? You know, that you get 2 tickets to graduation, who gets the 2 tickets? I mean,
Well,
but I think to your point, I can think more through it. And if we can find a way to do it, to manage it, then I'm all for it.
Right. Okay. Ultimately, the student's going to have to pick which car they're in. So,
well, this is true.
It's about the student and their experience is the primary thing. And I think if we can really make that come home to everyone, everybody's not in the car. So, you know, some people that really are close to that student, if there's only 4 seatbelts, then they're not going to get to be in there. So I asked the superintendent to look at this, but my main thing is I don't want the kids getting out of the car for any reason. They switch cars or anything like that. So you know, that's my biggest thing about this whole event is that we follow the guidelines, that no one gets out of the car. If they can't roll down their window, then they have to know that ahead of time. They have to know what they can bring, what they can't bring. We've always had, you know, alcohol rules and smoking rules, and I'm hoping all those are going to be enforced. And I trust you all to figure out the very, very slim exception where we need to do something different. But I also worry that you can't open Pandora's box either. And I will say somebody brought up on Facebook Live today that they were twins. And so they wanted to know if they had 2 cars. So that's just one more thing. That's one more thing to put in your thinking cap.
Yeah.
And if we, you know, another suggestion might be that, you know, that we're going to have kids that are going to opt out of this. So not every child is going to participate. And so could those slots be allocated for the families that need 2 vehicles? And I mean specifically in the case of divorce. And it doesn't have to be an extenuated, you know, documented circumstance. You know, what if the parents divorced or never married and have been married to other people, you know, for their entire lives, and then you have a child that literally thinks of 4 people as their biological parents because that's all they've ever known. You know, how do you tell that child to choose from one to the other? And you can't, you know, you can't have all of these people attend. So I think we just really need to do everything possible to make sure that those families, and I don't mean I need 8 of my closest relatives to come there. I'm talking specifically parents. So if there's any way we can, you know, that we can work that out, you know, I would really hope that we would have that conversation for the best interest of our kids.
And I think it's important to add, in case anybody's still listening, I saw a lot of questions on the Facebook Live today. You know, why not do it at the stadium? Why not here? Why not there? And I had those same exact thoughts. I thought we could spread out. We could do this. We could do that. The quick answer is, because the hour is getting late, the quick answer is that the superintendent has been in touch with the healthcare professionals. And the big thing was the windows stay up. Nothing goes into or out of the car. No. So the idea of having people spread, you know, entering into and out of a stadium and spread 6 feet apart we're not there yet. We may be there in a couple months after graduation, but we probably likely are not going to be there by May 29th. So that just thought that was worth noting. And again, in case anybody's still listening. Mr. Jones.
This will be my last comment on the issue. I was with Ms. Striplin when she described what seemed like a herring situation. I do not agree about the issue of folks not getting along being an issue why 2 people should have a car. It's one thing if someone's life is at risk, someone feels intimidated, they've had a violent past or a harrowing past, but just because they don't, or just because divorced people don't get along, I think you'll find that type of mixed blend everywhere. And I think that goes back to what the superintendent said, where the child becomes a major issue and the parents come together to support the child. It's something altogether different when we talk about circumstances where somebody feels that their life may be at risk, or it brings back harrowing experiences of violence. That I can relate to, having come from an abused home. But with a family that just, you know, moved on, no, all the in-laws, the stepmamas and half mamas and Everybody can get in there and get a seatbelt and get in the car.
All right, Mr. Superintendent, I think the hour is getting late. Are we ready to, Ms. Bowen, did you want to?
Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm good. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Superintendent, are we about ready to go to the consent agenda?
I think we're there, Madam Chair. I think we're there.
There's more.
Yes, we have a few more things, but if we can keep it cooking, we'll be good.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Move by Ms. Strickland, all in favor of the consent agenda through.
Opening her face, so.
What?
Ms. Williams.
I was listening to Ms. Rasmussen to make sure I heard what you were saying was the motion and the second. It's 7 through 17, correct?
Correct, through 17. The traditional consent agenda, not item 18. And
None of the 18s.
None of the 18s yet.
None of the 18s.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Let's show that unanimously approved. That takes us to item 18, where item 18.0 through item 18.06 have been pulled. So the remainder of the 18 agenda item is the consent construction items, which I abstain from. Is there a motion and a second?
I move.
Motion to table those items.
Okay, Mr. Jones, second by Ms. Bowen.
Yes.
Without objection, I'll show it unanimously approved, except for my abstention. Is that correct?
That's fine.
No objection, thank you. That takes us to item 19.01.
Ms. Paul,
Yes.
hey, you're up.
Good evening. Okay, so item 19.01 is amendments to the audit committee policy, which is policy 6840. These amendments were necessary as a result of changes to Senate Bill 7014. And the major change was just that that bill required that a school board member serve as chair of the audit committee. And there were some other minor changes to the policy to reflect our current way of work.
Okay, and we need to convene a public hearing, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have no speakers on any agenda items, no speakers on this agenda item. You can.
So we've convened a public hearing. There are no public speakers, so we will close the public hearing and we will take a vote on to.
I move acceptance.
Been moved and seconded.
All right, motion by Ms. Jones, second by Ms. Wood. All in favor, say aye.
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 What happened?
You voted yes, Mr. Jones, correct?
Yeah, I moved it.
So it's unanimously approved. That takes us to 19.02 as an MOU with the LCTA.
All right, Ms. McAllister, you're up for the next three.
Okay. Ooh, yay. All right. Good evening, school board members again. I come before you with the first item for your review and consideration, which is 19.02, the memorandum of understanding as it relates to our professional working responsibilities and conditions for all of our employees for Leon County School. We worked collaboratively with each leader of each bargaining unit to put together a document that will reflect the working conditions and expectations of all district employees to protect themselves as well as the best interests of our young people. The document is about 6 pages long, but it outlines being flexible and available to conduct work, whether at the on-site or whether remotely.
I move acceptance.
I second.
By Mr. Jones, second by Ms. Bowen. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Show it unanimously approved. 19.03.
19.03, ladies and gentlemen, deals with all of the items that were tentatively agreed upon with the Leon County Teachers Association and Leon County School leadership. This is all the verbiage and the money that came before you before, but the verbiage as well as the professional responsibilities of teachers during this pandemic. It was tentatively agreed on a couple of weeks ago. Now we're bringing it for your review and consideration. This includes language and money that you already approved.
Move approval.
Moved by Ms. Wood, second by Mr. Jones. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Show it unanimously approved.
Where are we?
The last item for your consideration is 19.04, ladies and gentlemen. It's the one-time pay enhancement for exempt personnel. This year, oh, go ahead.
No.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ms. McAllister. Keep going.
No, that's okay. This item being brought before you is a one-time pay enhancement for all exempt staff. On your documents or in your documents included from our office, list all those persons that would be included in this one-time pay enhancement. It's in line with both 1010 and LESPA. Those bargaining units each received 75 cents per hour, but it went to their hourly, it was added to their hourly rate and then would be added to their base pay. However, for administration or exempt staff, this is a one-time pay enhancement that will be paid over 3 months. April, May, and June for a total of $14.40. And it's not reoccurring.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Wood, second by Mr. Jones. Any opposition? Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
I oppose no. Show it unanimously approved. Thank you, Ms. McAllister.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Howcroft, are you still on the line? I know it's late.
He forgot.
There he is.
Oh man.
Right. You made him go first and last. That's terrible.
Oh my gosh. Hope you had dinner. And dessert.
No, we didn't.
Oh my goodness. There he is.
All right, James, go ahead real quick. Four Rivers.
Four Rivers, we had an agreement with Four Rivers to help staff and prepare meals for our 6 sites that are not school sites.
Move approval.
I move approval. Second.
Second by Ms. Bowen with much gratitude. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Good. So James, you get to come in late tomorrow.
I've got a training at 7:30 in the morning.
Oh,
wow.
Awesome. All right, Mr. Albritton, you too. And I can see you're in your office.
Oh yes, it's going to be an early morning.
Last one. Last but not
Yes.
least.
And I'm gonna have to brag on this just a little bit because this is one of the bright spots of the virus, with the schools being closed. We originally worked with Allstate to give us a conceptual budget for this. We were looking at tearing down 2 buildings and reworking the site and the utilities. And this was the main artery of the campus. And we were asking them to do it in a 9-week period. They were looking at working 7 days a week, 10-hour minimum days. And so they gave us an estimate of $2.2 million. It was the original estimate. I'm gonna go ahead and move forward with the item. Item 1906, the superintendent recommends approval of Allstate Construction Inc., guaranteed maximum price, GMP, contract to phase 4 construction manager at risk for RFQ 427-2018, construction manager at risk for Rickards High School. This is for the demolition of buildings 3, 5, site work and utilities. The GMP is $1,353,205.
move approval.
Move approval. Second. Whichever.
Moved by Ms. Striplin, second by Ms. Bowen. I need to abstain from this item because of my employment and the fact that Allstate is a member of my association. But if there are no other objections, we can show it unanimously approved except for my abstention.
Yes. Okay. Nope. Aye.
Uh-huh.
I don't know where we are.
Big man's got to eat. He's like, I got to eat. Good job, Danny. So if you do the math, it came in about $900,000 under where that was projected, which is good. Which is good news for us.
That's good.
Yeah, it's great.
That's great, Mrs. Super.
All right.
All minds clear?
All minds clear.
Superintendent, I got one question for you. What about families? What about families that don't have cars?
So they're going to reach out to their individual principals, and we are working on a deal with some local vendors to help those families. That's not going to be a reason that kids can't come. So if they have a family situation or dynamic where they don't have a vehicle, they need to reach out to their school principal. They will get with us and Dr. Gale, and we're working some partnerships. We have some white fleet vehicles of our own, and then we're also going to reach out to Enterprise, Hertz, and some of the people we do business with to see what kind of deal we can get. That's only for those special extenuating circumstances.
And maybe one of those feather flags could be used for any vendor who would be able to whether it be car dealerships or rental car companies, they would be able to get that in kind recognition as a sponsor for our graduation.
Right. Yeah. So all options are on the table, and I'll continue to talk with principals about the issue Ms. Striplin raised about the split families and try to think outside of the box to still accommodate what we want to do.
Thank you. And Mr. Superintendent,
I'm glad it was brought up.
What?
So I was glad it was brought up.
Oh, yes. Madam Chair, I think also, Mr. Superintendent, I'm certain you'll take care of this, that the deadline, drop dead date for requesting a car is not waited until 3 hours before the graduation date. I mean, the time for the graduation. I certainly know that that's probably part of the plan.
Yes.
Thanks, sir. Oh, well, thanks.
And
for my cousins,
well, but then for the family whose car breaks down the morning of graduation, that's
well, that's different.
Also, I would be concerned about the stigma of the white cars that are in our fleet.
Right. So I'm talking about So to Mr. Jones,
they're not hearses, are they?
No, what she's saying is they have LCS on the side, so they're going to look over and see, oh, there's a kid in one of those LCS cars.
VIP.
That's a good point. And trust me, I have one of those cars out here. You don't want to get in it. So yeah. So I think to your point, Ms. Rasmussen, a better approach would be for us to work with some companies during this time to see help. All right. I agree.
Right. Okay.
Mine's clear.
I'm clear.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.